Translate this by Friday and I'll give you my salary. Damian Cross, billionaire CEO of Crosstech Industries, slammed the Mandarin contract onto the mahogany conference table with theatrical flair. The room erupted in laughter, executive laughter, the kind that comes easy when you're never the punchline. Grant Hale, his VP of International Operations, led the chorus, slapping the table like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. Near the wall, Maya Linwood kept polishing the same bronze sculpture she'd been working on for the past 10 minutes, her movement steady and invisible. She had 72 hours before the eviction notice became final. 72 hours before her mother's hospital deposit came due. 72 hours to stay invisible in a room full of people who'd never once looked her way. But Maya wasn't just a maid. And that contract, the one they were all laughing about, was written in a language she knew better than her own heartbeat. We invite you to follow this story to the very end. Like and comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The morning had started like every other morning for the past 8 months. Maya Linwood arrived at Crosstech Tower at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her shift officially began, because being early was the only insurance policy she could afford. The pre-dawn city stretched gray and indifferent beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 32nd floor, and Maya moved through it like a ghost through walls, present but unseen, necessary but unacknowledged. She pushed her cleaning cart past the executive conference room, its glass walls still darkened, the chairs arranged in perfect symmetry around a table that cost more than her annual salary. This was the landscape of her days, polished surfaces and expensive silence, interrupted only by the soft swish of her microfiber cloth and the occasional ding of an elevator delivering someone important to somewhere important. Maya, you missed a spot on the Rothman office door handle. She turned to find Cheryl Morrison, the facilities supervisor, pointing with the kind of precision usually reserved for surgical strikes. Cheryl was 43, wore her authority like armor, and seemed to believe that power was a finite resource. If the cleaners had any, there'd be less for her. I'll take care of it right away, Maya said, her voice carefully neutral. See that you do. Mr. Cross has a major presentation today. Everything needs to be perfect. Maya nodded and redirected her cart, though she knew for a fact she'd already cleaned that handle twice. Cheryl just needed to be seen supervising, needed to justify her own existence in the pecking order. It was a game Maya had learned not to play. There were no winners on her rung of the ladder, only people who got fired slower. She returned to the handle, polished it again, and caught her reflection in the brass. 28 years old, dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches, eyes that had learned to look down before anyone noticed they were looking at all. Her mother said she had her father's eyes, sharp, observant, missing nothing. Her father would have hated seeing what she'd become. But her father was dead, and the dead didn't pay hospital bills. By 7:30 a.m., the executive floor had begun its transformation from mausoleum to terrarium, filling with the particular species of human that thrived in climates of pressure and profit. Maya had perfected the art of selective invisibility, present enough to do her job, absent enough not to remind anyone she was human. She was emptying a wastepaper basket in Grant Hale's office when she heard his voice in the hallway. Complete disaster, Damian. The Beijing deal is falling apart because nobody in this building can read Mandarin above a third-grade level. Maya's hands stilled. She recognized that tone. Grant's particular brand of manufactured panic, the kind he deployed when he needed to look indispensable. We have translators, Damian Cross replied, his voice carrying the bored authority of someone who'd never had to worry about being understood. Johnson was supposed to handle it. Johnson quit yesterday. Apparently we've been underpaying him for 3 years and he finally noticed. Grant's footsteps paused outside his office door. The proposal is due Friday. If we don't submit it perfectly translated, with all the technical specifications in place, we lose the contract. $12 million. Gone. Maya set down the wastepaper basket slowly, carefully, making no sound. So find someone else, Damian said. There are 1,000 translators in this city. Not in 48 hours there aren't, and definitely not ones who understand semiconductor architecture well enough to translate technical documentation without destroying the meaning. The conversation moved away down the hall, but Maya remained frozen by the desk, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. semiconductor architecture, Mandarin technical translation. A proposal her father could have translated in his sleep. A proposal she could translate right now if anyone bothered to ask. But nobody would ask. She was the maid. She was invisible. She was safe in her invisibility, even if safety sometimes felt like drowning in slow motion. The day progressed according to its usual choreography. Maya cleaned 17 offices, restocked 12 supply cabinets, and endured 3 separate occasions of executives walking directly into her cart without apology or acknowledgement. She took her lunch break in the basement cafeteria, a fluorescent purgatory where the janitorial staff, security guards, and mailroom clerks gathered in their designated corner, separate from the real employees. "You hear about the big meeting today?" Marcus, one of the night security guards picking up an early shift, leaned against the vending machine with the easy posture of someone who'd stopped caring what management thought years ago. Supposedly, Cross is freaking out about some Chinese contract. Mandarin, Maya corrected automatically, then wished she hadn't. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know the difference?" "It's, never mind, just something I read somewhere." But Rosa, the other day shift cleaner who'd worked at Crosstech for 15 years, was watching her with the kind of attention that made Maya nervous. Rosa missed nothing, forgot less, and had a habit of asking questions that got under your skin. "Your father was an engineer, wasn't he?" Rosa said quietly. "Before." Maya's sandwich suddenly tasted like cardboard. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long. I remember when he worked here. Brilliant man. Always respectful, always had time to say hello. Not like these new ones." Rosa's eyes narrowed slightly. "He spoke Mandarin, didn't he? Something about working in Taiwan?" "Shanghai," Maya said, then immediately regretted confirming anything. "But like I said, that was a long time ago." She finished her lunch quickly and returned to the 32nd floor, where the afternoon sun now poured through the western windows, turning the glass conference room into a greenhouse of ambition and expensive suits. At 3:00 p.m., the meeting began. Maya shouldn't have been there. Her supervisor had explicitly told her to avoid the executive wing during major presentations, but the standing order was that Mr. Cross's private office needed to be dusted every afternoon between 2:00 and 4:00, meeting or no meeting. So she'd slipped in through the connecting door, quiet as smoke, and positioned herself near the window where the light would make her even more invisible than usual. The conference room's glass walls were supposed to be soundproofed, but Maya had discovered months ago that if you stood at just the right angle, the acoustics of the corner amplified every word. It was how she'd learned more about Crosstech's business in 8 months than most junior executives learned in 2 years. Damian Cross stood at the head of the table, 62 years old and wearing his wealth like a second skin. Tailored suit, Swiss watch, the kind of posture that came from never having heard the word no applied to himself. Flanking him were the usual suspects: Grant Hale, VP of International Operations, whose ambition was exceeded only by his talent for taking credit; Melissa Chen, CFO, the only woman in the room who'd clawed her way to power and spent every day defending her territory; and 6 other executives whose faces blurred together in Maya's mind, interchangeable parts in the machine. The Beijing Semiconductor Alliance proposal is due in 47 hours, Damian said, pacing before the display screen where a Mandarin document glowed in incomprehensible characters. This contract represents not just $12 million in immediate revenue, but a foothold in the Asian market we've been trying to crack for 5 years. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "And we currently have no one qualified to translate the technical specifications." "What about outsourcing?" Melissa suggested. "There are firms. The documentation includes proprietary information about our quantum encryption protocols," Grant interrupted. "We can't risk it leaving the building. Security breach aside, we'd violate about 6 different NDAs." Maya continued dusting the bookshelf, moving the cloth in slow circles over leather spines that had probably never been opened, but her eyes kept drifting to the screen, to the characters she could read as easily as English, maybe easier. Her father had insisted she grow up bilingual. Never limit your mind to one way of seeing the world, Maya Bug. The memory arrived sharp and unwelcome. Her father at the kitchen table in their old apartment, the good apartment, the before everything fell apart apartment, teaching her the radicals that formed the building blocks of written Mandarin. his patience infinite, his accent perfect, his hands stained with motor oil from whatever project he'd been working on in the Crosstech labs. The proposal contains specific technical language about semiconductor fabrication processes, Damien continued. Not just vocabulary, conceptual frameworks that require someone who understands both the language and the engineering. Johnson understood both, Grant said. That's why we're screwed now that he's gone. Johnson understood neither, Melissa muttered. His translations were functional at best. I reviewed his work on the Singapore proposal last year. He mistranslated optimization protocol as best guessing strategy. A few executives chuckled nervously. Maya's cloth paused mid-swipe. She'd seen the Singapore proposal. She'd read it while cleaning Damien's office one evening, and she'd noticed at least 7 significant translation errors that had somehow made it through. She'd mentioned it to no one, because who would have listened? The point is, Damien said, his voice sharpening with impatience, we need a solution. Grant, you're international operations. This is your domain. Fix it. Grant straightened, his expression shifting into the configuration Maya had learned to recognize as problem-solving theater. I have a contact at Thomson Translation Services. They handle confidential work. If we expedite, 47 hours, Grant. By the time we vet them, establish NDAs, and brief them on the technical background, we'll have maybe 12 hours for actual translation. It's not enough. The room fell silent except for the whisper of Maya's cloth against leather. She should leave. She should finish her work and get out before anyone remembered she existed. But her feet seemed rooted to the floor, her attention locked on the document displayed on the screen. She could read it. Not just read it, understand it. Her father had spent 5 years developing the quantum encryption architecture that formed the foundation of Crosstech's semiconductor division. She'd grown up listening to him explain the principles at dinner, reducing complex engineering concepts to stories a child could follow. And when she'd gotten older, when languages had come to her like breathing, he'd taught her how to bridge the conceptual gaps between English technical terminology and its Mandarin equivalents. You can't just translate words, Maya Bug, he'd said. You have to translate ideas. The same concept might need completely different structures in different languages. She'd been 16 when he'd said that. 12 years ago. A lifetime ago. Before Crosstech had decided his division was redundant, before the quiet firing that was never called a firing, before her father's death in a car accident that the police report called consistent with driver fatigue. But Maya had always suspected was something darker. This is unacceptable. Damien's voice cracked like a whip, snapping Maya back to the present. We built this company on innovation and execution. We don't fail because of logistics. With respect, sir, Melissa said carefully, sometimes logistics determine everything. Damien turned to Grant, his expression glacial. You have 47 hours to find me someone who can translate this document flawlessly. I don't care if you have to drag a professor out of Harvard or bribe someone at the Chinese embassy. Make it happen. Understood. Grant nodded, but Maya saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, quickly masked. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, executives clustering in groups of 2 or 3, voices lowered in that peculiar register of people discussing problems they were too important to solve themselves. Maya finished her dusting and moved toward the connecting door, her movements deliberately slow and soundless. Wait. The word stopped her like a physical barrier. She turned to find Grant Hale standing 5 feet away, his expression unreadable. You're the cleaning staff assigned to this floor? Yes, sir. His eyes traveled over her. The gray uniform, the supply cart, the general air of insignificance she'd cultivated like armor. How long have you worked here? 8 months, sir. Do you have security clearance for sensitive documents? Maya's pulse quickened. I have level 3 clearance, sir. All senior floor staff do, for situations where we need to work around confidential materials. This was true. Her clearance had been part of her initial background check, extensive, thorough, revealing nothing about her father because she'd used her mother's maiden name on the application. Linwood, not Zhao. Clean slate. Invisible history. Grant studied her for another moment, then seemed to dismiss her from relevance. Fine. Just make sure you maintain proper protocol. Nothing you see or hear in this office leaves this office. Of course, sir. She resumed her exit, but as she guided her cart toward the door, she heard Damien's voice rise above the murmur. Actually, you know what? I've got an idea. The room quieted. Maya's hands tightened on the cart handle. Johnson walked out because we weren't paying him enough, right? Because we didn't value his work? Damien's smile was sharp and theatrical. So let's make this interesting. Let's put real stakes on the table. He walked to the conference table and placed one hand on the Mandarin proposal. Whoever can translate this document perfectly, technically accurately, by Friday at noon gets my annual salary for this quarter, $300,000. The room erupted in surprised laughter, the kind of laughter that comes when someone powerful makes a joke you're not sure is a joke. Are you serious? Melissa said. Completely. It's about motivation, people. We've got 47 hours. I want everyone in this building who has even the remotest qualification to try their hand at it. He swept his arm toward the document dramatically. Translate this, and my salary is yours. Grant's smile had sharpened into something predatory. That's certainly motivating. Damn right it is. Let's see some hustle for once instead of excuses. Damien's gaze traveled across the room, touching each executive, landing briefly, so briefly Maya almost imagined it, on her. Then his attention moved on and she realized she had in fact imagined it. She was furniture. She was wallpaper. She was invisible. But $300,000 could pay off the eviction, her mother's hospital bills, and buy them time to figure out something better than survival. $300,000 was everything. And she could translate that document in 8 hours, maybe less, if she had access to her father's old research journals where he documented the precise terminology for every process Crosstech had ever developed. She pushed her cart into the hallway, her mind racing faster than her heart. This was insane. This was impossible. This was a golden ticket wrapped in dynamite, because exposing her skills meant exposing her history, and exposing her history meant questions about why she was here, why she'd hidden, why the daughter of Dr. James Zhao was working as a maid in the company that had destroyed him. But her mother's hospital room, with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell, and the way her mother's hand felt like paper in hers, that was real. The eviction notice taped to their apartment door, that was real. The choice between rent and groceries, between medicine and electricity, that was real. Maya finished her shift in a daze, cleaning on autopilot while her mind constructed and deconstructed plans. She could submit an anonymous translation, slip it under Grant's door after hours, but they'd want to know who'd done it, would investigate, would discover her anyway. She could claim she'd hired an outside translator using her own meager savings, but that lie would crumble under any scrutiny. Or she could do nothing. She could stay invisible, stay safe, and watch $300,000 disappear into Grant Hale's pocket, because Grant would find someone, probably steal their work, and take credit. She'd seen him do it a dozen times with other people's ideas. The thought crystallized into certainty. Grant wouldn't let this opportunity pass. He'd figure out a way to claim that money, even if he had to cheat to do it. By the time Maya clocked out at 6 p.m., she'd made no decisions except to go home, check on her mother, and think. But as she rode the elevator down 32 floors, her reflection in the polished doors looked different somehow, less invisible, more dangerous. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt like the first full breath she'd taken in 8 months. Maya's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had been vintage when that was a euphemism for falling apart. The elevator had been broken for 3 years. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and resignation. The eviction notice was still taped to her door, the words "final warning" visible through the brown paper like a threat written in invisible ink. She let herself in to find her mother dozing on the couch, the TV playing a Filipino drama at low volume. Elena Linwood, Elena Zhao, before she'd reclaimed her maiden name after her husband's death, looked smaller than she had yesterday, her illness eating her from the inside out with patient malice. Anak, her mother's eyes opened, still sharp despite everything. You're late. Long day. Maya set her bag down and moved to the kitchenette where she'd left soup warming in the slow cooker. How are you feeling? The same as this morning. Elena pushed herself upright with visible effort. Did you talk to the landlord about the extension? He said maybe. I'll follow up tomorrow. The lie came easily. The landlord had said no, had said he'd get a better rent from new tenants, had looked at her the way people looked at problems they were tired of solving. Maya had left his office with her dignity intact and her hope crushed, which was becoming a specialty of hers. She brought her mother soup, made sure she took her evening medications, and pretended everything was fine until Elena fell asleep again on the couch, too weak to make it to the bedroom. Then Maya sat at the tiny kitchen table, opened her laptop, and stared at the screen. $300,000. The number glowed in her mind like a beacon and a warning. She pulled up her email, found the company directory she'd bookmarked months ago, and located Grant Hale's office extension. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What if she just sent him an email, explained that she had translation skills, offered to try? But Grant wouldn't take her seriously. She was the maid. Even if she submitted the most perfect translation in human history, he'd assume she'd stolen it from somewhere, hired someone else, cheated somehow. Because people like Grant couldn't imagine that people like her might be capable of anything beyond pushing a cleaning cart. Her eyes drifted to the bookshelf in the corner, 3 shelves of sagging particle board holding her father's research journals. Rescued from his office the day after his funeral before Crosstech had swept through and claimed everything as company property. Her mother hadn't known she'd taken them. Maya had stuffed them in her school backpack, walked past security with her head down and her heart hammering, and kept them hidden ever since. 15 leather-bound journals, filled with her father's meticulous handwriting in English and Mandarin, documenting every project, every breakthrough, every technical specification he'd developed in his 23 years at Crosstech. They were probably worth millions to the right buyer. They were definitely illegal for her to possess. They were all she had left of him. Maya pulled Volume 7 from the shelf, the one dated 2019-2020, and opened it to a random page. Her father's handwriting marched across the paper in tidy columns, mixing languages effortlessly. Quantum entanglement verification protocol requires Liangzi Jiuchan framework, but English term insufficient for describing phase coherence maintenance. She could practically hear his voice, patient and careful, explaining concepts that would take other people years to understand. He'd never talked down to her, never simplified beyond what was necessary for clarity. He trusted her mind to stretch and grow and understand. And then Crosstech had fired him, quietly, elegantly, with a severance package that came with an ironclad NDA and the implicit threat of legal destruction if he ever spoke about what had happened. Maya had been 16, old enough to understand that something was deeply wrong, but too young to understand what or how to fight it. Her father had never told her the details. He'd just gotten quieter, more distant, working on freelance projects that never quite materialized, his confidence eroding like coastline. When he'd died 6 months later, his car found at the bottom of an embankment, the brake lines mysteriously corroded. The police had ruled it an accident. The insurance company had eventually paid out. And Maya's mother had stopped asking questions because questions couldn't bring him back and might take away what little they had left. But Maya had never stopped wondering. And now she was back inside the building that had killed him, wearing a gray uniform and a fake name, invisible to everyone who'd erased her father from the company history. She closed the journal and returned to her laptop, pulling up the Crosstech public directory. Grant Hale had joined the company in 2018, 2 years before her father's firing. Damian Cross had been CEO since 2015. Melissa Chen had been CFO since 2016. They'd all been there. They'd all known her father. They'd all watched him disappear. And now they needed something only she could provide. Maya's hands moved before her mind had fully formed the plan. She opened a new document and began typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard with muscle memory that came from years of her father's late-night lessons. She wouldn't submit the translation officially. She wouldn't walk into Grant's office and announce herself. But she could leave something small, a sample, a proof of concept, a hint that someone in the building had the skills they needed. Just enough to test the waters, just enough to see if they were paying attention. She worked until midnight, translating the first 2 pages of the proposal with meticulous accuracy, cross-referencing her father's journals for the precise technical terminology. The document covered quantum encryption protocols for semiconductor manufacturing, exactly the kind of work her father had pioneered. She knew this material like she knew her own name. Better, maybe, because her own name was a lie. When she finished, she saved the translation on a USB drive, shut down her laptop, and sat in the dark apartment listening to her mother's labored breathing from the couch. Tomorrow was Thursday. The proposal was due Friday at noon. That gave her 24 hours to decide if she was brave enough or desperate enough to step out of the shadows. $300,000. Her mother's breathing caught, stuttered, resumed. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. Outside, the city carried on its indifferent existence. Maya closed her eyes and thought about invisibility, and whether it was the same thing as safety, and whether she'd ever actually been safe at all. At 5:43 a.m. on Thursday morning, Maya arrived at Crosstech Tower with the USB drive in her pocket, and a plan that felt less like strategy and more like controlled drowning. The lobby was nearly empty, just a few early arrivals moving through the turnstiles with the glazed expression of people who'd sold their circadian rhythms for career advancement. She badged through security, took the elevator to 32, and pushed her cart down the hallway toward Grant Hale's office. The lights were still on motion sensors, flickering to life as she passed, making her feel like she was triggering a series of alarms. Grant's office was locked, but Maya had a master key for cleaning access. She let herself in, moved to his desk, and placed the USB drive on his keyboard. Not hidden, not obvious, just present. No note, no explanation. Just 2 pages of perfect translation that would prove someone in this building could do what they needed. She was turning to leave when she heard voices in the hallway. Checked with 3 agencies, everyone's booked or unqualified. Grant's voice, and he was close. Maya grabbed her cleaning supplies and moved toward the interior office door, but the handle turned before she reached it. She pivoted, fell into her cleaning crouch by the bookshelf, and became invisible through sheer force of will. Grant entered with Melissa Chen, both carrying coffee cups and the frazzled energy of people who'd been up too late solving problems they didn't have solutions for. Thompson Translation finally called back, Melissa was saying. They can do it, but they want $50,000 for the rush job and they can't start until tomorrow morning. Which gives us 0 time for review. Grant tossed his briefcase onto his desk, then stopped. What's this? Maya kept her head down, her cloth moving in steady circles on the bookshelf's lower shelf, her heart suddenly loud enough she was sure they could hear it. A USB drive, Melissa said unnecessarily. I can see that. Where did it come from? Silence. Maya could feel them looking around the office, could feel the moment they spotted her presence. You. Grant's voice had sharpened. Did you leave this here? Maya turned slowly, carefully keeping her expression neutral. I'm sorry, sir. This USB drive. Did you leave it on my desk? No, sir. I just arrived. I haven't touched your desk yet. It wasn't technically a lie. She'd placed it on his keyboard, not his desk. The distinction felt important, like the difference between drowning and swimming was just a matter of which direction you moved your arms. Grant studied her for a long moment, then turned to Melissa. Check building security. I want to know who's been in this office. Grant, we're kind of on a deadline. Somebody left a random USB drive on my desk, Melissa. That's either a security breach or someone's idea of a joke. Either way, I want to know. He picked up the drive with the kind of caution usually reserved for live grenades, held it up to the light as if that would reveal its secrets. Could be a virus, could be corporate espionage, could be some kid from IT playing games. Or it could be the solution to your $12 million problem, Maya thought, but didn't say. She returned to her cleaning, moving from the bookshelf to the window, staying peripheral and unthreatening. Grant and Melissa had already dismissed her from relevance, their attention locked on the mysterious drive. I'll have it scan it, Grant said finally. If it's clean, we'll see what's on it. And if it's the translation we need, then we'll find out who left it and why. Grant's smile was cold and calculating. Either way, this just got interesting. They left together, taking the USB drive with them, and Maya remained in the office with her heart racing and her hands steady on the cleaning cloth. She'd taken the first step off the cliff. Now she just had to hope there was something other than rocks at the bottom. The morning unfolded with agonizing slowness. Maya moved through her usual routine, cleaning offices, restocking supplies, being invisible, while her mind spun through scenarios. Would they recognize the quality of the translation? Would they investigate? Would they trace it back to her somehow? At 10:30 a.m., she was cleaning the conference room when Grant's voice echoed from down the hall. "Get everyone in here, now." 5 minutes later, the executive team had assembled, and Maya was trapped behind the corner bookshelf with her cleaning cart, unable to leave without drawing attention to herself. So she did what she'd perfected. She became furniture, fading into the background while the real people conducted their real business. "It scanned the drive," Grant announced. "It's clean. No viruses, no malware. Just a document. 2 pages of translated text." He connected the drive to the conference room display, and Maya's translation appeared on the screen, her father's technical terminology rendered in flawless Mandarin characters. "This is..." Melissa leaned forward, her expression shifting from skepticism to something closer to awe. "This is really good. I had my assistant's girlfriend, she's a linguistics student, check the basic grammar. It's perfect." "The technical terminology is what matters," Damien Cross said, entering the room with the kind of timing that suggested he'd been hovering nearby waiting for his cue. "Can anyone verify that?" "I sent it to Professor Chen at MIT, Grant said. Maya noted how he'd already appropriated the translation, speaking about it as if he'd commissioned it. He confirmed the technical language is sophisticated and accurate. Whoever did this understands both semiconductor architecture and advanced Mandarin. "So we have a mystery translator in the building." Damien smiled, and Maya recognized the expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd just caught a scent. "How delightful." "The question is who and why," Grant said. "Nobody leaves a USB drive on my desk at 5 a.m. anonymously unless they want something." "Maybe they want the $300,000, Melissa suggested dryly. "Then why not come forward? Why the cloak and dagger routine?" "Maybe they're scared of you, Grant," Damien said, and the room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. "Not everyone responds well to your particular management style." Grant's jaw tightened, but he kept his professional smile in place. "What matters is we've got proof that someone can do this work. We need to find them." "Post an internal notice," Damien decided. "Anonymous submissions welcome. Have them send the full translation to a secure Dropbox, and we'll verify quality before we reveal the winner. Make it clear the offer still stands. Perfect translation by tomorrow noon gets $300,000. Maya's cloth paused mid-swipe. This was escalating faster than she'd anticipated. She'd meant to test the waters, not dive into the deep end. "I'll draft the notice now," Grant said, and Maya could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes, calculating angles and advantages. "We'll blast it to every employee by lunch." "What?" "Perfect." Damien checked his watch. 40 hours until deadline. Let's see what we're working with." The meeting dissolved, executives scattering to their various territories, and Maya finally made her escape. She abandoned her cart in the supply closet and took the stairs down to the basement cafeteria, needing air and space and time to think. She'd wanted to create an opening. Instead, she'd created a spectacle. The cafeteria was crowded with lunch rush traffic, but Maya found a corner table and pulled out her phone. The internal notice had already hit her work email. Urgent opportunity. Crosstech seeks qualified translator for critical Mandarin proposal. Anonymous submissions accepted via secure Dropbox. Complete, accurate translation required by Friday. 12:00 p.m. Compensation, $300,000. Details and submission portal. Link. $300,000 now publicly dangled in front of everyone in the building like a lottery ticket. Maya could already imagine the chaos. Underqualified people submitting garbage translations, IT fielding 1,000 questions, Grant and Damien sifting through submissions looking for the mystery translator who'd left the preview. And somewhere in that chaos, Maya would have to decide if she was actually going through with this. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's nurse. "Elena's oxygen levels dropping. Might need to adjust medication. Can you come in?" Maya closed her eyes. 40 hours until the deadline. $300,000. Her mother's oxygen levels dropping. The universe had never been subtle about its deadlines. She opened her laptop in the corner of the cafeteria, pulled up the secure Dropbox link, and started working. She had her father's journals in her bag. She'd started carrying them everywhere. Superstitious armor against a world that kept demanding more than she had to give. Now she pulled out Volume 7 and began translating in earnest. The work consumed her. Everything else, the cafeteria noise, her cleaning shift, the clock ticking toward Friday, faded into background static while she focused on the language. Mandarin flowed through her fingers like water, her father's voice in her ear guiding her through the technical specifications. When you translate, Maya Bug, you're not converting words. You're converting understanding. Find the idea first, then find the words that carry it. She translated for 3 hours, barely looking up, her soup growing cold and forgotten at her elbow. The proposal was complex but beautiful in its way, a framework for quantum encryption that would revolutionize secure communication in semiconductor manufacturing. Her father would have loved this. He'd spent his career building toward exactly this kind of breakthrough. By 3:00 p.m., she'd completed 15 pages. By 5:00 p.m., 30 pages. The proposal was 53 pages total, dense with technical specifications and architectural diagrams. She could finish it by midnight if she skipped her cleaning shift, worked straight through, ignored everything else. Or she could stop now. Submit what she had. Let someone else finish it. Stay invisible. Stay safe. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the nurse. Never mind. Levels stabilizing. False alarm. See you tomorrow. Maya's hand stilled on the keyboard. False alarm. This time. She saved her work, uploaded it to the Dropbox, and closed her laptop. Then she gathered her things, returned to the 32nd floor, and finished her cleaning shift like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She'd stepped out of the shadows far enough that someone might notice her shadow. And once you'd been seen, invisibility became a lot harder to maintain. At 11:47 p.m., Maya submitted the complete translation from her apartment, her mother sleeping fitfully in the next room, the city lights blinking through their window like distant stars. She didn't include her name, didn't add a cover letter or explanation. Just 53 pages of perfect Mandarin technical translation, her father's legacy encoded in every character. Then she shut down her laptop, checked on her mother, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow the deadline hit. Tomorrow she'd find out if stepping out of the shadows had been brave or stupid, salvation or suicide. Tomorrow would tell her if invisibility had ever actually kept her safe, or if it had just been another word for slowly disappearing. Maya's alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. Friday morning, dragging her from dreams where Mandarin characters rained from the sky like accusations. She silenced it quickly, checked her mother, still sleeping, breathing steady, and dressed in the dark. Her hands trembled as she buttoned her gray uniform, and she had to start over twice before getting it right. The translation was submitted. The deadline was in 7 hours, and she had no idea what would happen when Crosstech opened that file and found 53 pages of work that should have been impossible for anyone in the building to produce. The subway ride to work felt longer than usual, every stop an eternity, every delay a sign from the universe that she should turn around and run. But running required money, and money required staying invisible long enough to collect a paycheck, and invisibility was becoming harder to maintain with every choice she made. She badged through security at 5:43 a.m., the lobby guard nodding without really seeing her, and took the elevator up to 32. The building felt different this morning, charged somehow, like the air before a thunderstorm. Or maybe that was just her imagination, her guilt and fear projecting themselves onto innocent architecture. The executive floor was dark and silent. Maya pushed her cart down the hallway, the wheels squeaking slightly, and began her usual routine. But her eyes kept drifting to Grant's office, where light already glowed beneath the door despite the early hour. He was in there, working or waiting or planning something. She couldn't tell which. But the light felt like a warning, a reminder that men like Grant didn't sleep when they smelled opportunity. Maya was restocking the supply closet outside the conference room when she heard voices approaching, multiple voices, urgent and overlapping. She stepped back into the closet's shadows. The door opened just enough to see through. Grant and Melissa emerged from the elevator, both carrying coffee and laptops, both moving with the kind of speed that suggested something had shifted overnight. "You're sure it's complete?" Melissa was saying. 53 pages, every technical specification translated. IT verified it at 4 a.m. I've been reviewing it since. Grant's voice carried a note Maya had never heard before, something almost like reverence, quickly buried under professional efficiency. "It's flawless, Melissa. Better than Johnson ever was. better than the Thompson agency could have done in a month. And still no idea who submitted it. The Dropbox is anonymous by design. Whoever did this knew exactly how to cover their tracks. They paused outside Grant's office, and Maya held her breath. But they're in this building. They have to be. The translation uses internal terminology that wouldn't be accessible to outside contractors, specific project code names that aren't public. Melissa frowned. That's a pretty short list of people. Shorter than you think. Johnson's gone. Dr. Zhao. Grant stopped, seemed to catch himself. Well, the old guard is gone. This is someone new, someone who's been hiding. Maya's pulse spiked at her father's name, spoken so casually, so dismissively. The old guard, as if her father had simply retired instead of being systematically destroyed. Damien wants to meet at 8 to review, Melissa said. He's bringing in Professor Chen from MIT to verify the technical accuracy. If it checks out, we submit to Beijing at noon as planned. And then we find out who did it and why they're playing games. Grant's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. $300,000 buys a lot of loyalty, or a lot of information about why someone's been hiding skills like this. They disappeared into Grant's office, and Maya remained frozen in the supply closet, her mind racing. They were going to verify the translation. They were going to submit it, and then they were going to hunt for whoever had done it, because men like Grant couldn't stand mysteries they didn't control. She needed to be ready. She needed a plan that went beyond submit translation and hope for the best. Because hope wasn't a strategy, and best-case scenarios had a way of collapsing into worst-case nightmares when you were dealing with people who saw other humans as resources to be extracted. Maya finished her supply restock and moved to the conference room, where she began the careful choreography of cleaning around expensive furniture. The room was empty now, but in 3 hours it would be filled with executives deciding the fate of her translation, and potentially her life. At 7:45 a.m., people began arriving. Damien Cross came first, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Maya's annual rent, carrying a leather portfolio and the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his own importance. He was followed by Melissa, Grant, and 3 other executives whose names Maya had learned but whose faces still blurred together in her mind. And then came someone new. A man in his 60s, slight build, wire-rimmed glasses, carrying himself with the particular authority of someone whose power came from knowledge rather than position. Professor Chen, Maya realized. The MIT expert Grant had mentioned. Dr. Chen, thank you for coming on such short notice. Damien shook his hand with the performative warmth of networking. Your insights will be invaluable. The document you sent was remarkable, Professor Chen replied, his accent carrying traces of Taiwan. I've been reviewing technical translations for 30 years. This is among the finest I've encountered. Maya's cloth paused mid-swipe on the window. She forced herself to keep moving, to maintain the rhythm of invisibility, but her ears were locked on every word. That's exactly what we needed to hear, Grant said, gesturing everyone toward the conference table. Please, have a seat. We'll walk through the key sections. They settled around the table, and someone, Melissa, Maya thought, connected a laptop to the display screen. Her translation appeared. Mandarin characters marching across the wall in crisp precision, and Maya felt a strange vertiginous sensation, like watching herself from outside her body. This was her work. Her father's knowledge filtered through her understanding, rendered visible for people who had never seen her as anything but furniture. It felt exposing and powerful in equal measure, like standing naked in a spotlight while simultaneously wearing armor. Let's start with Section 3, Professor Chen said, adjusting his glasses. The quantum entanglement verification protocols. This is where most translators fail, because the conceptual framework doesn't map cleanly between languages. He began reading aloud in Mandarin, his pronunciation perfect, his tone analytical. Maya recognized the passage. It had taken her 2 hours to get it right, cross-referencing 3 of her father's journals to find the precise terminology that captured both the technical accuracy and the conceptual elegance. The translator uses Liangzi Zhu Chan Yun Zheng here, Professor Chen continued, which is technically correct but fairly standard. What's impressive is this next part. They use Xiangwei Xiang Ganxing Wei Hu to describe phase coherence maintenance. That's sophisticated. That's someone who understands that the English term maintenance implies active intervention, while the process itself is actually about creating conditions for self-sustaining coherence. Is that good? Damien asked. It's exceptional. It shows deep understanding of both the physics and the linguistic nuance. Professor Chen looked up from the screen, his expression thoughtful. Whoever translated this isn't just bilingual, they're bicultural in their technical thinking. That's extraordinarily rare. Grant leaned forward. Could this be Johnson's work? Maybe he left something behind before he quit? I reviewed Johnson's previous translations before coming here, Professor Chen said. This isn't his work. Johnson was competent but mechanical. This translator has elegance. They're making choices that prioritize conceptual clarity over literal accuracy, which is exactly what technical translation requires, but most people can't achieve. Maya's heart was hammering so hard she was certain they could hear it. Professor Chen was describing her father's methodology, the approach he'd spent years teaching her. Don't translate words, translate understanding. The idea had become so fundamental to her thinking, she'd forgotten it was unusual. So we're confident submitting this to Beijing? Melissa asked. Absolutely. In fact, I'd say this translation gives you an advantage. It shows deep respect for the language and the concepts. That matters in Chinese business culture. Professor Chen paused, his gaze drifting toward the window where Maya was cleaning. May I ask who the translator is? I'd very much like to meet them. Talent like this should be recognized. That's the interesting part, Grant said, and his smile had an edge that made Maya's stomach clench. We don't know. The translation was submitted anonymously. Anonymous? That's unusual. Very unusual, Damien agreed, which is why we're going to find out who they are before we hand over $300,000. Grant, you've been investigating? It pulled security logs for the Dropbox submissions. The upload came from an internal IP address at 11:47 p.m. last night. Building security shows 5 people in the building at that time. 3 security guards, 1 overnight systems administrator, and 1 cleaning staff member. Maya's cloth had stopped moving. She forced it to start again, keeping her head down, making herself as small and insignificant as possible. The sysadmin was in the server room with 2 witnesses, Grant continued. The security guards were at their stations with camera verification. That leaves 1 person, cleaning staff, 4th floor east wing. Badge log shows she was here until midnight. The room went silent. Maya could feel their attention shifting, restructuring, beginning to orbit around a new possibility they hadn't considered before. Wait, Melissa said slowly. You're suggesting a cleaning staff member did this translation? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm following the evidence. Grant's voice had gone cold and precise. Badge 4457 logged in at 5:43 p.m. yesterday, logged out at 12:03 a.m. The translation was submitted at 11:47 p.m. from a workstation in the 4th floor break room, right where cleaning staff take their dinner breaks. That's... Damien stopped, seemed to recalibrate. That's impossible. We background check everyone, Grant. Cleaning staff don't have advanced degrees in semiconductor engineering and native-level Mandarin. Apparently one of them does. Professor Chen was looking directly at Maya now, his expression shifting from curiosity to recognition. Young woman, may I ask your name? Maya's world narrowed to that single question, that single moment of choice. She could lie. She could run. She could maintain her invisibility for maybe another few seconds before it shattered completely. Or she could step into the light and face whatever came next. She set down her cleaning cloth, straightened, and met Professor Chen's gaze. Maya Linwood. And did you translate this document, Ms. Linwood? The room held its breath. 5 executives and 1 professor, all staring at her, all recalculating their understanding of reality to accommodate the impossible fact of her competence. Yes, Maya said quietly. I did. Grant stood so fast his chair rolled backward. You're telling me a maid? I'm telling you I translated your proposal, Maya interrupted, and her voice was steadier than she'd expected. 53 pages, complete technical specifications, submitted on time as requested. Do you want to discuss my qualifications or do you want to submit it to Beijing? Damien's expression had gone from shock to something more calculating. How is this possible? Your employment file says you have a high school education and no language skills beyond English. My employment file says what I needed it to say. Maya stepped away from the window, moving toward the table, claiming space in a room that had never acknowledged her right to occupy it. My actual qualifications include fluency in Mandarin, undergraduate coursework in electrical engineering, and extensive knowledge of Crosstech's semiconductor architecture, which is why my translation is flawless and you don't have time to question it. This is unacceptable, Grant said, his face flushing. You lied on your application. You've been working here under false pretenses. I worked here doing the job you hired me to do. You never asked if I spoke Mandarin. You never asked if I understood semiconductor engineering. You just assumed that someone pushing a cleaning cart couldn't possibly be qualified for anything else. Maya held his gaze, refusing to back down. Your assumptions aren't my responsibility. But your dishonesty is, Grant. Damien's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. Let's focus on what matters. Professor Chen, is the translation adequate for submission? It's more than adequate. It's exceptional. Then we submit it. Damien turned to Maya, his expression unreadable. You'll need to verify your identity, provide documentation of your qualifications, and explain exactly how you came to possess detailed knowledge of Crosstech's proprietary technology. But first, he gestured to an empty chair at the table. Sit down. You're about to become a very wealthy woman, and we need to discuss terms. Maya didn't move. Terms were already stated. $300,000 for a perfect translation submitted by deadline. I fulfilled my end. That was before we knew who you were, Grant interjected. Before we knew you'd been lying. I never lied, Maya said, and her voice had gone cold. I omitted. There's a difference. And if you're planning to renege on your public offer because you don't like who fulfilled it, that's not just unfair, it's illegal. You made a contract, Mr. Cross, in front of witnesses. $300,000 for perfect translation by Friday noon. It's 8:15 a.m. My work is verified. Pay me. The silence that followed was absolute. Melissa looked like she was fighting a smile. Professor Chen's expression had shifted to open respect. Damien and Grant were locked in some kind of silent communication, years of partnership allowing them to negotiate without words. Finally, Damien nodded. You're right. A deal's a deal. Melissa, process the payment. Standard contractor agreement, full amount transferred by end of business today. Wait, Grant said. We need to investigate how she accessed proprietary information. We need to verify she didn't steal. We need to submit this proposal in 3 hours and 45 minutes, Damien interrupted. Everything else is secondary. Ms. Linwood, you'll make yourself available for follow-up discussions. Grant, you'll coordinate with IT to verify the technical specifications one final time. Melissa, handle the payment and the paperwork. Professor Chen, thank you for your consultation. We'll have your fee wired today. He stood, and the meeting was effectively over, dismissed by executive fiat. People began gathering their materials, the room filling with the shuffle and murmur of transition. But Grant remained fixed in place, his eyes on Maya, his expression a mixture of fury and calculation that sent warning signals racing down her spine. How did you really learn this material? He asked quietly, pitched low enough that only Maya could hear as the others filed out. Crosstech's semiconductor architecture isn't public information. You couldn't have picked it up from a textbook. Maya met his gaze steadily. I learned from someone who helped build it. Who? That's not relevant to the contract we just completed. It's very relevant if you've been accessing confidential files, stealing research, committing corporate espionage. I committed translation, Maya said, which is what you asked for. If you're looking for a crime to investigate, maybe start with why your last translator quit after being underpaid for 3 years, or why a company this size didn't have adequate backup for critical international contracts, or why you were planning to take credit for finding a solution when you'd done nothing but panic. Grant's jaw tightened. You're making dangerous assumptions about what I would or wouldn't have done. I'm making observations based on 8 months of watching you work. You take credit for other people's ideas, Mr. Hale. I've seen you do it in 4 different meetings. Why would this have been any different? Because $300,000 was on the line. Exactly. $300,000 you didn't want to pay out to anyone. $300,000 that would hurt a lot less if you could claim you'd found the translator, coordinated the project, managed the deliverable. Maya picked up her cleaning cloth, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. But I submitted first, I delivered flawlessly, and now you're angry because you can't take credit for my work. She walked away before he could respond, pushing her cart toward the door, her legs shaking with the effort of maintaining composure. Behind her, she heard Grant's phone buzz, heard him answer with a clipped, "What?" Then his voice changed, sharpened. "You're sure? Check it again. Check everything." Maya kept walking, but her instincts were screaming warnings she couldn't quite decipher. Something had shifted in Grant's tone, something predatory and pleased. She made it to the supply closet before her legs gave out, sinking onto an overturned bucket in the darkness, her hands pressed against her face. She'd done it. She'd stepped forward, claimed her work, demanded payment. In 3 hours, they'd submit the proposal. By end of business today, she'd have $300,000. She'd won. So why did it feel like she'd just triggered a trap she couldn't see? The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Maya tried to maintain her normal routine, cleaning offices, restocking supplies, but everything felt surreal, like she was moving through a dream where the rules kept changing. People stared at her now. Executives she'd cleaned around for months suddenly seeing her for the first time, their expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. At 10:30 a.m., she was called to HR. The Human Resources Office was on the 15th floor, a beige purgatory of cubicles and motivational posters, and the particular smell of anxiety that came from a room where people's livelihoods were routinely terminated. Donna Richards, the HR director, was a woman in her 50s with a helmet of gray hair and the expression of someone who'd stopped believing in happy endings around the same time she'd stopped believing in Santa Claus. "Ms. Linwood, please sit." Donna gestured to a chair across from her desk, then opened a manila folder. "We need to discuss some discrepancies in your employment application." Maya sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. "What kind of discrepancies?" "You listed your education as high school diploma, no college experience. Is that accurate?" "I attended 2 years of community college before I had to stop. I didn't complete a degree." "But you have substantial technical knowledge that suggests more extensive education." "I have knowledge gained through independent study and family background. That doesn't require formal degrees." Donna made a note, her pen scratching across paper. "Your application also doesn't mention any language skills." The application didn't ask about language skills. It asked if I could perform the duties of a cleaning staff position, which I can, and have. "But you failed to disclose information that would have qualified you for higher-level positions." "I applied for a cleaning position," Maya interrupted, her patience beginning to fray. "I disclosed everything relevant to that position. What I didn't disclose were skills you didn't need, didn't ask about, and wouldn't have believed I possessed if I'd mentioned them." Donna's expression tightened. "That's quite an assumption." "Is it? If I'd walked in here 8 months ago and said I spoke fluent Mandarin and understood semiconductor architecture, would you have hired me for anything beyond pushing a cleaning cart?" The silence answered the question more honestly than words could have. Donna closed the folder, folded her hands on top of it, and fixed Maya with a look that was probably meant to be intimidating but came across as tired. "Mr. Hale has requested a full background investigation. He believes you may have accessed confidential information without authorization." There it was. The trap Grant had been setting. The reason his voice had changed during that phone call. He couldn't take credit for her work, so he'd settled for destroying her credibility. "What kind of information?" Maya asked carefully. "Proprietary technical documentation, research archives, project files that require security clearance you don't possess." "I have Level 3 clearance. I've had it since my 2nd week of employment." Level 3 clearance allows you to work around confidential materials. It doesn't authorize you to read them, study them, or use them for personal benefit. Maya's hands tightened in her lap. "I didn't access any files beyond what I needed to do my job." "Then how did you acquire the knowledge necessary to translate highly technical semiconductor documentation?" "I told you. Family background and independent study." "That's not an adequate explanation. It's the only explanation I'm giving without a lawyer present." Maya stood and Donna's eyes widened slightly. Am I being fired, Ms. Richards? We're still investigating. Then I'm returning to my shift. If you want to continue this conversation, schedule it through my attorney. I'll have their contact information for you by end of day. She walked out before Donna could respond, her heart hammering, her mind already racing through implications and contingencies. Grant was trying to build a case for termination, or worse, criminal charges, corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, the kinds of accusations that came with lawyers and courtrooms, and the potential for jail time. $300,000 wouldn't mean much if she was arrested before she could access it. Maya took the stairs back to 32, needing the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline flooding her system. When she emerged on the executive floor, she found it in controlled chaos, people moving with purpose, voices overlapping, the energy of a deadline being met. 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes until the proposal submission deadline. She pushed her cart toward the conference room and found the door open. Executives clustered around the display screen where her translation glowed in final review. Damien stood at the head of the table, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Mandarin that Maya understood perfectly. Yes, we're sending it now. Complete technical specifications, all documentation included. We're confident this represents the highest quality proposal for partnership. He was speaking to the Beijing Semiconductor Alliance. This was the final confirmation call before submission. Maya lingered in the doorway, invisible again, watching as Grant typed commands into the laptop connected to the display. His expression was focused, professional, giving nothing away. But his shoulders carried tension that suggested he wasn't as confident as he appeared. Sending in 3, 2, 1. Grant hit a final key, and the screen flashed upload complete. It's submitted. The room released a collective breath. Melissa checked her watch, and 11:52 a.m., 8 minutes to spare. Professor Chen said they'd need 2 to 3 days to review, Damien said, ending his call. So we wait, and while we wait, his gaze found Maya in the doorway. Ms. Linwood, a word, please. The other executives filed out, though Grant lingered, his presence a reminder that this conversation was anything but private. Maya stepped into the conference room, her cleaning cart left in the hallway like abandoned armor. I've spoken with our counsel, Damien began without preamble. They've advised that paying you the full contract amount raises some legal questions, given your employment status and the circumstances of the translation. Maya's stomach dropped. We had an agreement. We did, but agreements made without full disclosure of material facts can be voided. Damien's expression wasn't cruel, just businesslike, as if he were explaining a simple accounting error. You failed to disclose your qualifications when you were hired. That raises questions about your intent. My intent was to survive, Maya said, her voice harder than she'd planned. I needed a job. You had an opening. I was qualified for the position I applied for. Nothing in that transaction was fraudulent. But your subsequent actions, accessing confidential information, using proprietary knowledge, I didn't access anything. I used knowledge I already possessed. Maya took a breath, forced herself to slow down. My father was Dr. James Zhao. He worked here for 23 years, until you fired him in 2020. He spent his career developing the quantum encryption architecture that forms the foundation of your semiconductor division. I learned that material from him, directly from the source, before he died. The name landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Damien's expression shifted, something complicated passing through his eyes, recognition, calculation, maybe guilt. Grant had gone very still. James Zhao, Damien repeated slowly. I remember him. Brilliant engineer. It was unfortunate how things ended. Unfortunate, Maya echoed, and the word tasted like acid. That's one way to describe destroying a man's career and driving him to his death. Now wait just a... Grant started, but Damien held up a hand. Dr. Zhao's departure was a business decision. We restructured the division, consolidated positions. It wasn't personal. It killed him. Maya's voice cracked despite her best efforts. He died 6 months after you fired him. His car went off an embankment because he was exhausted from working 3 freelance jobs trying to support a family after you took away everything he'd built. So don't tell me it wasn't personal. Don't tell me it was just business. The silence stretched thin and terrible. Somewhere outside, phones were ringing. Somewhere in the building, people were having normal Friday conversations, making lunch plans, counting down to the weekend. But in this room, the past and present had collided, and nobody seemed to know how to navigate the wreckage. "I'm sorry for your loss," Damien said finally, and he might have even meant it. "But that doesn't change the current situation. You concealed your identity and your qualifications. You may have accessed confidential files. I have my father's research journals," Maya interrupted. "Every project he worked on, every technical specification he developed, documented in his own handwriting. That's how I learned this material. Not from your servers, not from corporate espionage. From my father's personal notes, which became my property when he died." Grant straightened. "Those journals are company property. Any research conducted on company time belongs to Crosstech. The journals are personal. And even if they weren't, Crosstech relinquished all claim to my father's work when you fired him and made him sign an NDA. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim his work as yours while also pretending he never contributed anything worth protecting." "We should verify the journals exist," Grant said to Damien. "If she's lying about the source of her knowledge, I'm not lying, and you can verify anything you want, but not until after you pay me what you owe." Maya turned to Damien. "You made a public offer. I fulfilled the contract. Professor Chen verified the quality. If you're refusing payment, I want it in writing, with clear explanation of your legal justification. Because I'm fairly certain a court would be very interested in how a major corporation tried to defraud the daughter of an employee they fired under questionable circumstances." Damien's expression hardened. "Are you threatening legal action?" "I'm stating facts. You offered $300,000 for perfect translation by noon Friday. I delivered. It's now 11:57 a.m. and your proposal is submitted. Either honor the contract or explain in writing why you won't. Those are your options." The two men stared at her, and Maya could see the calculations running behind their eyes. The cost of paying versus the cost of fighting. The risk of a lawsuit versus the risk of looking weak. The value of her silence versus the price of her testimony about whatever had really happened to her father. Finally, Damien nodded. "Fine. Melissa will process the payment. Standard contractor rates, full amount by close of business today, as originally stated." "Thank you. But," his voice sharpened, "you're terminated effective immediately for falsifying your employment application and for creating a hostile work environment through your accusations." Maya's brief moment of victory evaporated. "Hostile work environment? I told the truth. You made unsubstantiated claims about company practices and accused executive leadership of responsibility for your father's death. That's hostile. That's grounds for immediate termination. Security will escort you from the building once we've processed your final paycheck." "You can't." "I can and I am. You wanted to play this game, Ms. Linwood? Fine. You win $300,000, but you lose everything else. No reference. No chance of reemployment at any Crosstech affiliate. And I will personally ensure that every company in this industry knows exactly what kind of employee you are. Talented but dishonest, skilled but untrustworthy." Damien's smile was cold and final. "Enjoy your victory. I hope it was worth it." He walked out, leaving Maya alone with Grant, who lingered by the display screen with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You should have stayed invisible," Grant said quietly. "You should have taken your paycheck, kept your head down, and been grateful for what you had. Now you've made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in the industry, and that $300,000 won't last nearly as long as you think." "At least I'll have my integrity," Maya said, though the words felt hollow. "Integrity doesn't pay hospital bills." Grant moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, the translation really was exceptional. You have real talent. Too bad you wasted it on revenge." "I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice." "Those aren't the same thing. You'll figure that out eventually." He left, and Maya stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the expensive furniture and glass walls and stunning views that had never been meant for someone like her. On the display screen, her translation still glowed, perfect, professional, proof that she was capable of so much more than anyone had imagined. But she was fired, blacklisted. escorted from the building like a criminal despite having done exactly what they'd asked. She'd won $300,000 and lost her future in the same conversation. The question now was whether that trade had been worth making, and whether Grant was right about integrity being cold comfort when you were counting pennies to pay for your mother's prescriptions. Maya would find out soon enough. Security arrived 12 minutes later. 2 guards Maya recognized from her morning shifts, their expressions carefully neutral as they flanked her in the hallway. The older one, Marcus, had shared coffee with her in the basement cafeteria just yesterday, complaining about his daughter's college tuition. Now, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Ms. Linwood, we need to escort you out of the building," he said, his voice professionally flat. "Please collect your personal belongings from your locker." Maya nodded, her throat too tight for words. She pushed her cleaning cart one final time down the hallway toward the service elevator, the guards trailing behind her like pallbearers at a funeral for a life she'd just killed. Executives watched from doorways, their faces showing various shades of curiosity and schadenfreude. The cleaning woman who dared to rise above her station now being marched out in disgrace. The descent to the basement felt like falling. Maya's ears popped with the pressure change, or maybe that was just her sinuses threatening tears she refused to shed in front of witnesses. The elevator doors opened onto the familiar fluorescent purgatory of the lower level, where Rosa was emerging from the supply room with an armload of toilet paper. She stopped when she saw Maya flanked by security, her expression shifting from surprise to understanding to something that looked almost like pride. "So you did it," Rosa said quietly. "You stepped up." "I stepped up and got fired," Maya replied, her voice rougher than she'd intended. "You got paid, though, didn't you? That's what matters." "Is it?" Maya wasn't sure anymore. $300,000 felt increasingly abstract, while the humiliation of this moment was devastatingly concrete. Rosa set down her supplies and moved closer, lowering her voice so the guards couldn't hear. "Your father would be proud. I knew him, you know, back when he worked here. He was a good man who got a bad deal, and now his daughter made them pay for it. That's not nothing, Maya." The use of her first name, spoken with such certainty, such recognition, nearly broke her composure. Maya blinked hard, nodded once, and continued to her locker. She had so few personal belongings here: a spare uniform, a pair of comfortable shoes, her father's journal, volume 7, that she'd been carrying for luck. She stuffed them into her backpack, closed the locker with a metallic clang that sounded like an ending, and turned back to the guards. "I'm ready." They walked her through the basement corridors past the cafeteria where the lunch shift was in full swing, past the maintenance shops and server rooms and all the invisible infrastructure that kept Crosstech Tower running. People stared. People whispered. Maya kept her head high and her eyes forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The lobby was worse. Noon rush hour meant a crowd of employees flowing in and out for lunch, and Maya's perp walk through their midst felt designed for maximum humiliation. She recognized faces from her cleaning shifts, people whose offices she'd tidied, whose wastepaper baskets she'd emptied, whose existence she'd supported without acknowledgement for 8 months. Now they were all looking at her, and she couldn't tell if the attention was worse than the invisibility had been. They reached the security desk, where a different guard, one Maya didn't know, was processing her exit badge. "Sign here, here, and here. Your final paycheck, including the contractor payment, will be direct deposited within 72 hours. You're permanently banned from Crosstech properties effective immediately. Any attempt to return will result in arrest for trespassing." Maya signed the forms with shaking hands, each signature feeling like a confession to crimes she hadn't committed. The guard took her badge, dropped it in a drawer with dozens of others, evidence of all the people who'd been ejected from this building before her, and gestured toward the exit. "Have a good day, ma'am." The automatic doors opened, spilling Maya onto the sidewalk into brilliant Friday afternoon sunshine that felt like mockery. Behind her, Crosstech Tower rose 32 stories into the cloudless sky, glass and steel and ambition, and she was no longer welcome inside its walls. She'd won. She'd lost. Both things were true simultaneously, and Maya had no idea which one would define her future. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother's nurse. "Elena asking for you. When can you visit?" Maya checked the time, 12:14 p.m., and calculated rapid transit schedules in her head. She could be at the hospital by 1 if she caught the next train. She could sit with her mother, tell her the good news about the money, avoid mentioning the bad news about everything else. She could pretend that this victory hadn't tasted so much like defeat. The subway ride to Sacred Heart Hospital passed in a blur of tunnels and stops, and other people's conversations washing over her like white noise. Maya sat with her backpack on her lap, her father's journal pressing against her chest through the canvas, solid and real, in a day that had turned increasingly surreal. $300,000. The number kept cycling through her mind, impossible and insufficient at the same time. It would save their apartment, cover her mother's treatments, buy them time to breathe. But Grant's words lingered like smoke. It won't last nearly as long as you think. He was right, of course. 300,000 sounded like wealth until you divided it by rent, medical bills, food, utilities, the thousand small expenses that ate away at survival. It was a cushion, not a solution, a temporary reprieve, not a permanent rescue, and she'd traded her future employment prospects for it. The train lurched to a stop at Sacred Heart Station, and Maya climbed the stairs into a neighborhood that never quite decided if it was declining or revitalizing. The hospital loomed ahead, 7 stories of institutional beige with the particular sadness that came from buildings designed around suffering. Her mother's room was on the 4th floor, overlooking a parking lot and a strip of trees that someone had optimistically called a healing garden. Elena was awake when Maya entered, propped against pillows, her oxygen cannula delivering steady breaths through translucent tubing. "Anak, you're here early." Elena's voice was thin but warm, her eyes brightening with the particular joy Maya had spent 8 months trying to preserve. "Did you get off work?" "Something like that." Maya pulled a chair close to the bed, took her mother's hand, paper-thin skin over bird-bone fragility. "How are you feeling?" "Better than yesterday. The new medication is helping," the nurse says. Elena studied her daughter's face with maternal precision. "Something happened. Tell me." Maya had planned to ease into it, to frame the story carefully, to emphasize victory over defeat. But sitting here in the antiseptic quiet with her mother's hand in hers, the truth came out in a rush. The translation, the confrontation, the payment, the firing, all of it spilling forward in overlapping fragments that probably made no sense but felt like finally exhaling after holding her breath for 8 months. When she finished, Elena was quiet for a long moment, her thumb stroking circles on the back of Maya's hand. "Your father would have done the same thing," she said finally. "He could never stand watching injustice without fighting back. That's what got him in trouble at Crosstech, you know? He saw things that were wrong and he spoke up, and they couldn't tolerate that." "What kind of things?" Maya had never gotten the full story, had been too young when it happened and too grieving afterward to push for details. Elena's expression clouded. "Technical things I didn't fully understand. Something about cutting corners on safety protocols, falsifying test results to meet deadlines. Your father documented everything, kept careful records. He thought that would protect him, that truth would be enough." She smiled sadly. "He forgot that powerful people don't care about truth when it threatens their profits." A chill ran down Maya's spine. What happened to his documentation? "He gave it to someone. A lawyer, I think, or maybe a journalist. I don't remember exactly. Those last months are blurry." Elena's eyes drifted toward the window, toward memory. "But nothing came of it. Crosstech has lawyers too, better lawyers, and they made everything go away. Including your father." "Mom, if Dad had evidence of criminal activity," Mehadanak past tense, "whatever he gave them, it wasn't enough. Or maybe it was too much, and they destroyed it." Elena's gaze returned to Maya, suddenly sharp. "Why? What are you thinking?" Maya's mind was racing. Her father's journals, the ones she'd rescued from his office, the ones Crosstech didn't know she possessed. They weren't just technical notes. They were evidence. Documentation of whatever corruption her father had witnessed, preserved in his meticulous handwriting. Evidence she'd just told Damian Cross and Grant Hale that she owned. "I need to make a phone call," Maya said, standing abruptly. "I'll be right back." She stepped into the hallway, pulled out her phone, and stared at the screen. She needed a lawyer. She needed advice. She needed someone who understood corporate law and criminal conspiracy and how to protect herself from powerful people who had every incentive to silence her. But lawyers cost money she didn't have yet, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she called the one person who might actually help. Professor Chen answered on the third ring. Wei? Professor Chen, this is Maya Linwood. We met this morning at CrossTech. Ah, yes, Ms. Linwood. I've been thinking about you. That was quite a performance, both the translation and the confrontation. How can I help you? Maya took a breath. You said my translation showed understanding that goes beyond normal bilingual skills, that it reflected bicultural technical thinking. That's correct. It was exceptional work. What if I told you I learned that approach from someone who worked at CrossTech 20 years ago? Someone who pioneered their quantum encryption architecture but was fired under suspicious circumstances. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Maya checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Professor Chen spoke, his voice careful and quiet. Are you talking about Dr. James Zhao? You knew him? Everyone in the semiconductor field knew of him. His work on phase-coherent quantum systems was revolutionary. When he left CrossTech so abruptly, there were rumors. Whispers about internal conflicts, suppressed research, safety concerns that were being ignored. Professor Chen paused. But nothing was ever proven. The man died shortly after, and CrossTech buried the story along with him. He was my father. Maya's voice cracked despite her best efforts. And I have his research journals, 15 volumes documenting everything he worked on, including whatever got him fired. I told CrossTech executives I have them, and now I'm terrified I've made myself a target. You should be terrified. Professor Chen's bluntness was almost refreshing. If those journals contain evidence of corporate malfeasance, CrossTech has every incentive to acquire or destroy them. And you just announced their existence to people with significant resources and questionable ethics. What should I do? First, secure the journals somewhere safe. Not your home, not any location CrossTech could associate with you. Second, document everything that happened today. Write down every conversation, every threat, every detail. Third, contact an attorney who specializes in whistleblower protection. Do you need a referral? I need several referrals. I need a lawyer. I need somewhere safe for my mother. Maya stopped, overwhelmed by the cascade of needs she couldn't meet. I need to know if I just destroyed my life for $300,000 and the satisfaction of telling powerful men they were wrong. You need to know if the fight was worth it, Professor Chen said gently. That's a question only you can answer. But I can tell you this, your father's work deserved recognition. His story deserves to be told. And you stepping forward might be the only chance either of those things ever happens. The question is whether you're willing to see it through, knowing it will cost you more than you've already paid. Maya looked through the window into her mother's hospital room, where Elena had dozed off again, her chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance, her life sustained by machines and medications that ate money faster than Maya could earn it. I don't have a choice, she said quietly. I'm already in this. The only question is whether I move forward or try to run. Then move forward. And Ms. Linwood, be very careful. CrossTech didn't become a multi-billion-dollar company by letting threats to their reputation persist. If your father's journals contain what I think they might, you've just declared war on people who fight dirty. They already fought dirty. They killed my father. But suspecting something and proving it are different things. Right now you have journals and accusations. What you need is evidence that will hold up in court, media coverage that will make the story too big to suppress, and protection sophisticated enough to keep you alive while the truth comes out. Professor Chen's voice softened slightly. I can help with one of those things. I have contacts at the Journal of Semiconductor Engineering who might be interested in reviewing your father's technical documentation. Not the corporate scandal, just the research itself. If his work was as groundbreaking as I remember, publication would establish his legacy regardless of what CrossTech wants the world to believe. Thank you. That would mean everything. Email me photographs of the relevant technical pages. I'll review them and reach out to my contacts. But Ms. Linwood, this only protects your father's scientific reputation. It doesn't protect you from CrossTech's legal department or whatever they might do to suppress the evidence of wrongdoing. One thing at a time, Maya said, though her stomach churned with anxiety. Thank you, Professor. Truly. She ended the call and returned to her mother's room, where Elena was stirring awake, her eyes finding Maya immediately. You have that look, Elena said. The same look your father used to get when he was about to do something brave and stupid. Maybe it's genetic. Maya sat back down, reclaimed her mother's hand. Mom, I need to move you somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere Crosstech can't find you if they come looking. Elena's expression sharpened. Why would they come looking for me? Because I have Dad's journals, and they might want them, and the easiest way to pressure me is through you. Maya squeezed her mother's hand gently. I know it's scary, and I know you're tired of moving, but do it, Elena interrupted. I'm tired, yes, but I'm not helpless, and I'm not stupid. If those journals are important enough to fight over, they're important enough to protect. What do you need me to do? Let me transfer you to a different facility under a different name, just temporarily, until I figure out how dangerous this is going to get. Under what name? Maya thought fast. Maria Reyes, your grandmother's name from before she immigrated. It's in the family but not connected to me in any public records. Elena nodded slowly. Maria Reyes, I can be her for a while. Your grandmother was a fighter too. It's fitting. She fixed Maya with a look that was pure maternal steel despite the oxygen cannula and the hospital gown. But Anak, you listen to me. Your father fought these people and lost. I don't want to lose you too. If this gets too dangerous, if they threaten you, you walk away. The money, the journals, the truth, none of it matters as much as you staying alive. I'll be careful. You'll be stubborn, just like him. But promise me anyway. I promise. Maya leaned forward, kissed her mother's forehead, breathed in the antiseptic smell mixed with Elena's fading perfume. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Maya Bug. The childhood nickname, spoken in her father's voice through her mother's mouth, nearly shattered her composure. But Maya held it together, stood up, and went to find her mother's nurse to discuss transfer options and payment plans and how to disappear someone inside the healthcare system. By 4:00 p.m., she'd arranged for Elena's transfer to a private care facility in Queens under the name Maria Reyes, paid the deposit with her credit card despite knowing the $300,000 hadn't cleared yet, and taken 3 different subway lines to throw off anyone who might be following her. Paranoia felt justified given the circumstances. By 6 p.m., she was back at her apartment, soon to be former apartment, once the eviction notice took effect, staring at 15 leather journals spread across her kitchen table. Her father's handwriting marched across the pages in English and Mandarin, documenting 23 years of research, innovation, and increasingly concerning observations about Crosstech's business practices. Maya started photographing pages, working methodically through volume 14, where her father's technical notes gave way to something darker. October 15, 2019, Damien insisted we falsify stress test results for the Singapore batch. I refused. He said it was just optimizing the data presentation. I said it was fraud. Meeting did not end well. November 3, 2019, found discrepancies in the quantum coherence measurements. Someone altered the lab reports after I submitted them, brought it to Grant's attention. He told me to be a team player. Since when is lying teamwork? December 12, 2019. They're pushing the Singapore delivery despite knowing the encryption keys are unstable under thermal stress. I've documented everything. If those chips fail in the field, people could die. But Damien says we'll address it in the next iteration. How many people have to die before we address it now? Maya's hands trembled as she photographed page after page of damning evidence. Her father hadn't just witnessed corner cutting, he'd documented systematic fraud, safety violations, and a pattern of prioritizing profits over human safety. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. This was criminal negligence at minimum, possibly manslaughter, if those Singapore chips had failed the way her father predicted. She was halfway through volume 15 when her laptop chimed with an email notification. The sender was an address she didn't recognize. The subject line simply, "We need to talk." Maya's finger hovered over the delete button, every instinct screaming trap. But curiosity, or maybe self-destructive compulsion, made her open it. Ms. Linwood, my name is Sarah Chen, investigative journalist with Tech Integrity News. I've been investigating Crosstech's business practices for 18 months, following reports of safety violations in their Asian manufacturing operations. I heard about your confrontation with company leadership this morning. Word travels fast in this industry, and I understand you may have documentation related to Dr. James Zhao's work at Crosstech. If you're willing to talk, I can offer you protection, media coverage, and a platform to tell your father's story. I can also connect you with attorneys who specialize in whistleblower cases. My contact information is below. Please reach out if you're interested in pursuing this further. Time is of the essence. Crosstech's legal team moves quickly when they perceive threats. Maya stared at the screen, her heart hammering. This could be legitimate. A journalist who'd been investigating Crosstech independently, now seeing an opportunity in Maya's very public confrontation. Or it could be a trap. Crosstech posing as a journalist to draw her out, to get her to hand over the journals voluntarily. She needed verification. She needed to know if Sarah Chen was real. Maya opened a new browser tab and searched Sarah Chen Tech Integrity News. The results came back immediately. Dozens of articles, a professional website, social media profiles showing a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper questions. Her most recent article was titled, "The Hidden Costs of Semiconductor Innovation, When Profit Margins Exceed Safety Margins." It was dated 3 weeks ago. It specifically mentioned Crosstech's Singapore operations and raised questions about chip failures that had led to data breaches in multiple financial institutions. Maya's breath caught breath. Her father's warnings about the Singapore batch, about unstable encryption keys, about thermal stress failures, they'd all come true. And someone had been investigating it, building a case, looking for evidence. Evidence Maya now possessed. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something closer to vindication, sharp and clarifying. Her father had been right. He tried to stop it. They'd silenced him, shipped the faulty chips anyway, and when people had died, because data breaches in financial institutions absolutely meant some people had died, through theft or fraud or cascading consequences, Crosstech had buried the story along with any trace of the engineer who'd tried to warn them. Maya's hands moved before her mind had fully processed the decision. She hit reply and typed, "Ms. Chen, I'm interested in talking, but I need verification that you are who you claim to be, and I need assurances about protection for both myself and my mother before I share any documentation. If you're serious about this story, we'll need to meet in person, in a public place with witnesses. Let me know your availability." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then immediately began second-guessing herself anyway. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of brave, stupid thing her mother had warned against. But it was also the right thing to do. And Maya was discovering that sometimes those two categories overlapped more than she'd like. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Maya stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello? Ms. Linwood, this is Grant Hale." Her blood turned to ice. "How did you get this number?" "It's in your employment file. Listen, I don't have much time. I'm calling from my personal phone, not company lines, because I need you to understand something." His voice was low, urgent, nothing like his usual polished executive persona. "You need to be very, very careful right now." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. Damien is escalating this faster than I expected. He's already contacted Crosstech's law firm about recovering your father's journals as company property. They're preparing to petition for a restraining order that would force you to surrender all materials related to Dr. Zhao's work pending a legal determination of ownership." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "Those journals are personal property. Crosstech relinquished all claim when they fired him. The law isn't that simple when trade secrets are involved. And Damien has resources you can't match, legal, financial, and otherwise." Grant paused. "I'm telling you this because despite what you think of me, I didn't agree with how we handled your father's situation. I was new to the company, I didn't have the full context, and by the time I understood what had actually happened, it was too late. Why should I believe you? Because I'm risking my career to warn you. Because your translation was the best work I've seen in a decade, and you deserve better than what's about to happen. Because..." He stopped, seemed to wrestle with something. Because I've spent 4 years watching this company do things that keep me up at night, and maybe this is my chance to do one decent thing before it all comes crashing down. Maya wanted to hang up. She wanted to believe him. She wanted both things simultaneously, which felt increasingly like the theme of her day. "What exactly is about to happen?" she asked. "Damien is going to try to acquire your father's journals through legal channels first. When that doesn't work fast enough, he'll try other methods. He has connections. Private investigators, corporate security firms that operate in gray areas. You need to secure those journals somewhere he can't access them, and you need to do it tonight." "I already have plans." "Whatever you're planning isn't enough," Grant interrupted. "You're thinking like a normal person fighting a normal fight. This isn't normal. This is a multi-billion-dollar company with a criminal past trying to ensure that past stays buried. Normal precautions won't cut it." Maya's other hand had unconsciously moved to rest on the nearest journal, as if she could protect it through touch alone. "What would you do?" "I'd make copies, multiple copies, and distribute them to people Damien can't touch. Lawyers with attorney-client privilege, journalists with source protection, academic institutions with independent oversight. I'd make it impossible for him to suppress the information, even if he gets the originals. And I'd get myself somewhere safe with witnesses and documentation of everything that happens from this point forward." "That sounds like you're describing someone preparing for war." "You're not preparing for war, Ms. Linwood. You're already in one. You just didn't realize it until now." Grant's voice softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I hope you win. Your father deserved better. You deserve better. And maybe if enough people like you keep fighting, companies like Crosstech will finally face consequences for what they've done." The line went dead before Maya could respond, leaving her alone in her kitchen with 15 journals and a growing certainty that her life had just gotten exponentially more complicated. She looked at the clock. 7:23 p.m. She had maybe 12 hours before Crosstech's legal team filed whatever motions Grant had warned about. 12 hours to secure the journals, protect herself, and transform from victim to threat in the eyes of people who played for keeps. Maya picked up her phone and called Professor Chen back. When he answered, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to send you all 15 volumes tonight, not just photographs. I need you to take physical custody, claim them as research materials for academic study, put them somewhere with institutional protection." "Can you do that?" Professor Chen was quiet for a moment. "That's a significant request. It implies you're anticipating legal action." "I'm anticipating worse than legal action, but I need to know my father's work is preserved, regardless of what happens to me." "Where are you?" Maya gave him her address, heard typing on the other end of the line. "I can be there in 90 minutes, Professor Chen said. "Pack everything carefully. We'll transport them to MIT's secure archives tonight, register them as historical research materials related to quantum encryption development. Once they're in the university system, Crosstech will need a court order to access them, and by then we'll have cataloged and copied everything." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We're about to find out if academic freedom still means something in the face of corporate power." He paused. "Miss Linwood, are you sure about this? Once we institutionalize these journals, once we make them part of the academic record, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle." "My father spent 23 years building that knowledge. He died trying to protect it. The least I can do is make sure the world knows what he created." Maya looked at the journals spread before her, her father's handwriting visible on every page, his voice echoing through every word. "I'm sure." "Then I'll see you in 90 minutes. And Maya, lock your doors, don't answer for anyone else, and keep your phone on. If anything happens before I arrive, call 911 first and me second." The fact that he thought to warn her should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like confirmation that she'd made the right choice, that stepping out of the shadows meant accepting danger as the price of visibility. Maya spent the next hour carefully packing the journals in waterproof bags, photographing every page she hadn't already captured, and uploading everything to 3 separate cloud storage accounts under fake names. By the time Professor Chen's knock came at exactly 8:53 p.m., she'd created a digital archive that would survive even if every physical copy disappeared. She opened the door to find him accompanied by 2 graduate students carrying document boxes and looking intensely serious about their mission. These are my research assistants, Professor Chen explained, gesturing to a young woman with purple hair and a young man wearing an MIT hoodie. They're both specializing in quantum encryption history. They'll help catalog everything properly. The three of them worked with impressive efficiency, carefully transferring each journal to an archival box, photographing covers and key pages, creating a chain of custody document that Maya signed with shaking hands. By 10:15 p.m., all 15 volumes were packed, labeled, and ready for transport. We'll take them directly to MIT's secure storage facility, Professor Chen said. You'll receive official documentation of the deposit within 48 hours. The university will grant you full access as the donor, but any attempt by outside parties to seize or subpoena the materials will require going through MIT's legal department, which takes these things very seriously. What if Crosstech claims ownership? Then it becomes a legal battle between Crosstech and MIT, which is a fight they can't win quietly. The publicity alone would destroy them. He handed Maya a business card. This is the university's general counsel. If Crosstech contacts you about the journals, refer them to this office and say nothing else. Don't confirm or deny possession. Don't discuss contents. Don't engage. Just give them this number. Maya took the card, her fingers numb with adrenaline and exhaustion. I don't know how to thank you. Preserve your father's legacy. Tell his story. Make sure the sacrifice he made and the sacrifice you're making means something. Professor Chen's expression softened. And Ms. Linwood? Be careful. The next few days are going to be difficult in ways you can't predict. Have people around you, document everything, and remember that truth is powerful, but it's not always enough to protect you from powerful people who want to suppress it. They left with the journals packed in boxes labeled Historical Research Materials, MIT Archives, and Maya closed the door on an apartment that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. Her father's journals were gone, secured but absent, and the space they'd occupied on her kitchen table looked like an accusation. She'd given away the last physical connection to her father's work, the last tangible proof that he'd existed and mattered, and created something beautiful before Crosstech had destroyed him. Now all she had left was her memory, her determination, and a journalist's email address that might be salvation or might be trap. Maya pulled out her laptop and replied to Sarah Chen's message with coordinates for a meeting, Saturday morning, 10:00 a.m., at a busy coffee shop in a neighborhood with security cameras and crowds. Public, witnessed, documented. Then she packed a bag with clothes, toiletries, and the few items she couldn't bear to leave behind, locked her apartment, and took a cab to a budget hotel near the hospital where her mother was now registered under a false name. She checked in under her own name, no point hiding when Crosstech already knew exactly where to find her, and collapsed on the thin mattress with her laptop open to Sarah Chen's articles about corporate malfeasance and safety violations, and all the ways powerful companies hurt people and got away with it. Maya read until her eyes burned, until she'd memorized every detail of every investigation, until she understood exactly what kind of fight she was walking into. Then she closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and lay in the darkness listening to the hotel's ambient noises, ice machines and distant traffic, and other people's lives continuing in rooms above and below and beside her own temporary refuge. Tomorrow she'd meet with a journalist who might help her or betray her. Tomorrow she'd find out if Grant's warning was genuine or elaborate manipulation. Tomorrow she'd discover whether stepping into the light had been courage or catastrophic error. But tonight, alone in a strange bed in a city that had never felt like home, Maya let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding since the moment she'd placed that USB drive on Grant's desk. She'd declared war on people who fought wars for profit, who crushed dissent as business strategy, who'd already killed her father and would probably try to kill her story, and possibly her, before this was finished. The only question now was whether she'd survive long enough to win. Saturday morning arrived with gray skies and the smell of rain that hadn't quite decided to fall. Maya woke at 6, her body trained by months of early shifts despite having nowhere to report. She showered in the cramped hotel bathroom, dressed in jeans and a sweater that didn't carry the stain of her gray uniform, and stared at her reflection trying to recognize the woman looking back. 48 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was sitting on evidence that could destroy a multi-billion-dollar company, preparing to meet a journalist who might be her salvation or her executioner, while her mother hid under an assumed name and her future hung suspended between vindication and annihilation. The woman in the mirror looked terrified. Maya tried on a different expression, determined, confident, ready, but it didn't take. Terror was honest, at least. She left the hotel at 8, took 2 different subway lines to throw off any potential surveillance, and arrived at the Bluebird Cafe in Brooklyn's Park Slope neighborhood at 9:23 a.m. The place was exactly what she'd hoped for, crowded with weekend brunchers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street, multiple security cameras visible at the entrance, and enough ambient noise to make covert recordings difficult. Maya ordered coffee she didn't want and claimed a corner table with clear sightlines to both doors. Then she waited, watching every person who entered, trying to distinguish ordinary customers from potential threats, and failing to tell the difference because everyone looked suspicious when you were this afraid. At 9:47 a.m., a woman in her 40s entered alone, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. She wore a leather jacket over a gray blouse, carried a messenger bag that looked expensive but worn, and moved with the particular confidence of someone who'd spent years walking into uncomfortable situations. Her eyes found Maya almost immediately, and something in her expression shifted: recognition, calculation, maybe sympathy. She approached the table directly. "Maya Linwood? Sarah Chen? That's me." She extended a hand and Maya shook it, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested someone who typed for a living. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this can't be easy." "Nothing about the last 2 days has been easy." Maya gestured to the opposite chair. "You're really a journalist? Not cross-tech corporate security pretending to be press?" Sarah smiled without humor as she sat. "Valid question. Here's my press credentials, my business card, and my last 3 published articles with byline verification. You can also call my editor at Tech Integrity News. His number's on the card, and he'll confirm I've been investigating Crosstech for 18 months. She slid the materials across the table. "I'm also going to record this conversation with your permission, both for accuracy and for your protection. If anything happens to you, there will be a documented record of what you told me." The casual acknowledgement that anything happening to Maya was a realistic concern should have been more disturbing. Instead, it felt almost reassuring. Someone finally treating the danger as real instead of dismissed. "You can record," Maya said. "I'll be recording too." "Smart." Sarah pulled out a digital recorder, set it on the table between them, and pressed record. "Saturday, November 9th, 10:02 a.m., interview with Maya Linwood regarding Crosstech Industries, Ms. Linwood, can you state for the record that you're participating in this conversation voluntarily and that you understand I'm a journalist who may publish information you provide?" "Yes to both." "Good. Let's start with the basics. You worked at Crosstech as cleaning staff for 8 months, then translated a critical business proposal that earned you $300,000 and got you fired. Is that accurate?" "Essentially, yes." "And you're the daughter of Dr. James Zhao, who worked at Crosstech for 23 years before being terminated in 2020. Also accurate?" Maya's throat tightened. "Yes." Sarah leaned forward slightly, her expression shifting from professional to genuinely concerned. "I'm sorry about your father. I never got the chance to interview him. By the time I started investigating Crosstech's Singapore operations, he was already gone. But his name kept appearing in internal documents I managed to obtain. He tried to stop what happened. He documented everything, and they destroyed him for it." "You know about Singapore?" "I know the chips Crosstech delivered to Singapore financial institutions in early 2020 had catastrophic failure rates that led to data breaches affecting 17 million people. I know those breaches resulted in at least 43 documented deaths from subsequent fraud, identity theft, and related criminal activity. I know Crosstech settled out of court with the affected institutions for undisclosed amounts and buried the story through aggressive legal action." Sarah's voice was steady, but her eyes were angry. "What I don't know is whether the failures were accidents or the predictable result of shipping products they knew were defective." Maya's hands had started shaking. She pressed them flat against the table, trying to steady herself through force of will. "My father predicted those failures. He documented that the quantum encryption keys were unstable under thermal stress. He told leadership that people would die if they shipped those chips. They fired him instead of fixing the problem." "Can you prove that?" "I have his research journals. 15 volumes, dated entries, technical specifications, and personal observations about Crosstech's decision-making process. He documented everything from October 2019 through February 2020, when they fired him. Maya met Sarah's gaze directly. I've already secured them with MIT's archives. They're beyond Crosstech's reach now. Sarah sat back, her expression shifting through surprise, respect, and something that looked almost like hope. Maya, that's extraordinary. That's exactly the kind of primary source documentation that can break this story wide open. But you understand what you're doing, right? You're providing evidence of criminal negligence at minimum, possibly manslaughter. Crosstech will come after you with everything they have. They already are. They fired me yesterday, threatened to blacklist me across the industry, and according to a warning I received last night, they're preparing legal action to seize the journals as company property. Good luck with that. MIT won't roll over easily. Sarah pulled out a laptop, opened it, and began typing notes. Okay, let's work backward. Tell me everything that happened at Crosstech, starting with why you were working there as a cleaner when you're obviously qualified for much more. So Maya told her. Not the sanitized version, not the strategic omissions, but the whole truth, her father's death, her mother's illness, the financial desperation that had driven her to apply under a false name, the 8 months of invisibility, the translation opportunity, the confrontation, and Grant's midnight warning that had sent her running to secure the journals. She talked for 40 minutes straight, Sarah occasionally interjecting clarifying questions, the recorder capturing every word. When Maya finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers poised over her laptop keyboard, her expression thoughtful. This is bigger than I thought, she said finally. I've been investigating Crosstech's business practices, the corner cutting, the safety violations, the pattern of prioritizing profits over people. But what you're describing is systematic conspiracy to conceal criminal negligence resulting in deaths. That's not a business story. That's a criminal investigation. Can you break it? I can publish the story? Absolutely. Tech Integrity News has been waiting for a solid source on the Singapore situation, and your father's journals combined with your testimony gives us what we need. But Maya, publication isn't protection. Crosstech will deny everything, attack your credibility, tie you up in lawsuits for years. You'll need more than a journalist. You'll need lawyers, financial resources, and probably witness protection depending on how aggressive they get. I have $300,000 coming, which will last maybe 6 months if Crosstech decides to bury you in legal fees. Sarah closed her laptop, fixed Maya with a serious look. I'm not trying to scare you off. I want to publish this story more than almost anything, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This will consume your life. It will be brutal and public, and you'll be attacked from every angle. Are you sure this is a fight you're willing to have? Maya thought about her father, about his car at the bottom of an embankment, about the police report that said accident when everything in her gut screamed murder. She thought about 43 people dead because Crosstech had shipped chips they knew were defective, about 17 million people whose data had been compromised, about all the suffering that could have been prevented if anyone had listened to the engineer trying to sound the alarm. My father tried to fight them alone, and they killed him, Maya said quietly. But I'm not alone anymore. I have his journals, I have your platform, and I have nothing left to lose except the truth. So yes, I'm sure. Sarah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Okay then, let's burn this place down. They spent the next 3 hours planning strategy. Sarah would write the initial article based on Maya's testimony and request access to the archived journals through MIT. She'd coordinate with her legal team to ensure Crosstech couldn't suppress publication through prior restraint. She'd reach out to her sources in the semiconductor industry to verify technical details, and to former Crosstech employees who might be willing to provide corroborating testimony. Maya would document everything that happened from this point forward, keep detailed records of any contact from Crosstech, and work with the whistleblower attorney Sarah recommended, a woman named Patricia Vance who'd successfully represented 3 previous cases against tech companies. Patricia's tough, she's brilliant, and she doesn't intimidate easily, Sarah said, writing down the attorney's contact information. She'll probably take your case pro bono given the public interest angle, but you should call her today. The sooner you have legal representation, the harder it is for Crosstech to corner you. What about my mother? Crosstech knows she exists. If they want to pressure me, Patricia can help with that too. Restraining orders, protective custody if necessary, documentation of any threats or contact. But honestly, Crosstech probably won't go after your mother directly. Too risky, too visible. They'll focus on legal pressure and character assassination, much safer from a liability perspective. The word probably wasn't as comforting as Sarah seemed to think it was, but Maya nodded anyway. At this point, probably safe was the best she could hope for. They exchanged contact information, synchronized their recordings, and agreed to speak daily as the story developed. Sarah would have a draft article ready within 48 hours, would send it to Maya for fact-checking before publication, and would coordinate the release with Patricia Vance to ensure maximum legal protection. One more thing, Sarah said as they prepared to leave. Crosstech is going to offer you money to go away. A lot of money, probably. More than the $300,000 you're owed. They'll frame it as a settlement, attach an NDA, and make it very tempting to just take the cash and disappear. I won't take it. You say that now. But when you're 6 months into legal battles, when your savings are gone and the attacks are relentless, and you're exhausted from fighting, that offer is going to look very different. I'm not judging. I've seen a lot of whistleblowers take settlements, and I don't blame them. I'm just warning you that the temptation will come, and you need to decide now what your limits are. Maya considered this, trying to imagine a future version of herself worn down enough to accept silence as the price of survival. She couldn't quite envision it, but she'd learned in the past 2 days that her imagination was limited when it came to predicting her own breaking points. If I reach my limit, I'll tell you, she said finally. I won't just disappear with a settlement. You'll know. That's all I can ask. Sarah stood, shouldered her messenger bag, and extended her hand again. Thank you for trusting me with this story. Your father deserves justice, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you get it for him. They shook hands, and Maya watched Sarah leave through the cafe's front door, disappearing into the gray Brooklyn morning with a story that could change everything or nothing, depending on how the next few weeks unfolded. Maya remained at the table for another 20 minutes, finishing coffee that had gone cold, trying to process the magnitude of what she'd just set in motion. Then her phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was Crosstech's legal department. The subject line read, "Cease and desist, immediate action required." Maya's stomach dropped, but she opened it anyway, reading through dense legal language that boiled down to, surrender your father's journals immediately. Cease all contact with media or third parties regarding Crosstech business. Sign the attached NDA, or face legal action for theft of trade secrets, breach of confidentiality, and tortious interference with business relationships. The attached NDA came with a settlement offer, $500,000, in exchange for permanent silence about everything related to Dr. James Zhao's employment, termination, or work product. Sarah had called it. Less than 4 hours after their meeting, Crosstech was already trying to buy Maya's silence for an amount that would have seemed like salvation yesterday, but today felt like an insult. $500,000 to erase her father's legacy, to pretend the Singapore deaths hadn't happened, to let Crosstech continue operating without accountability. Maya deleted the email without responding, then immediately called Patricia Vance's office. The receptionist who answered sounded harried but professional. Vance Legal, how can I help you? My name is Maya Linwood. Sarah Chen from Tech Integrity News referred me. I need to speak with Ms. Vance about whistleblower protection against Crosstech Industries. A pause. Crosstech Industries? Please hold. 30 seconds of elevator music, then a woman's voice came on the line, sharp, energetic, carrying the particular authority of someone who'd spent years winning arguments for a living. Miss Linwood, this is Patricia Vance. Sarah called me an hour ago about your situation. I've been expecting your call. Tell me what just happened. Crosstech sent me a cease and desist with a settlement offer, $500,000 to sign an NDA and surrender my father's journals. Don't respond. Don't acknowledge receipt. Forward the email to me immediately. I'm sending you my secure email address right now. Do not, under any circumstances, engage with their legal team directly. Patricia's typing was audible in the background. Are you somewhere safe? I'm in a public cafe in Brooklyn. Good. Stay in public places, stay visible, and document everything. I'm drafting a response to their cease and desist that will make it very clear you're represented by counsel and that any further contact needs to go through me. Sarah also mentioned you've secured primary source documents with MIT. 15 volumes of research journals archived yesterday evening. Excellent. That makes our position much stronger. MIT's general counsel won't let Crosstech bully them, which means the journals are effectively protected while we build the case. Patricia paused, her tone shifting slightly. Ms. Linwood, I'm going to be direct with you. Crosstech is a powerful opponent with virtually unlimited legal resources. This fight will be expensive, exhausting, and possibly dangerous. But I think we can win. I think your father's story deserves to be told. And I'm willing to represent you pro bono through initial proceedings, with costs covered if we ultimately win damages or settlements. Are you interested in retaining my services? Yes. Good. I'll send over retention documents today. Sign them, send them back, and from that moment forward, you're protected by attorney-client privilege. Don't talk to anyone from Crosstech. Don't respond to any communications. Don't discuss the case with anyone except me, Sarah Chen, with my explicit approval, and any investigators I bring onto the team. Understand? Understood. One more thing. Do you still have access to your Crosstech email? Maya checked her phone. Yes, they haven't shut it down yet. Don't access it. They're almost certainly monitoring it, and anything you send or receive can be subpoenaed. Forward me your login credentials. I'll have our IT team archive everything properly so we have a complete record, but you don't risk inadvertently creating evidence they can use against you. The level of strategic thinking, the immediate assumption of surveillance and legal traps, should have been paranoid. Instead, it felt like someone finally taking the threat seriously, treating Maya like a person worth protecting instead of a problem to be eliminated. Thank you, Maya said, and meant it more than Patricia could possibly know. Thank me when we've won. Right now, thank me by staying safe and following instructions. I'll be in touch within the hour. The call ended, and Maya sat in the cafe feeling simultaneously more protected and more exposed than she'd felt all morning. She had a journalist, she had a lawyer, she had a plan. She also had a target on her back the size of a multi-billion-dollar corporation's reputation. She paid for her cold coffee, left the cafe, and spent the rest of the afternoon wandering Brooklyn, keeping to crowded streets and well-lit areas, occasionally checking over her shoulder for surveillance that may or may not have been there. At 3:00 p.m., she visited her mother at the care facility in Queens, finding Elena awake and alert under her new assumed identity. How did the meeting go? Elena asked as soon as Maya entered her room. I have a journalist and a lawyer. Crosstech tried to buy my silence for $500,000. I declined. Elena studied her daughter's face. You're scared, terrified, but you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway. Elena reached for Maya's hand, squeezed it with what little strength she had. Your father would be so proud. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. He spent his last months feeling like he'd failed, like his warnings hadn't mattered. But you're making them matter. You're giving his death meaning. I'm trying. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're stronger than you think. You've survived 8 months of being invisible because you had to. Now you're visible because you chose to be. That takes a different kind of strength, but you have it. Elena's eyes were fierce despite her frailty. And you have me. I'm not much use right now, but I'm here, and I believe in you, and that has to count for something. It counts for everything, Maya whispered, leaning forward to rest her forehead against her mother's hand. I don't know what I'm doing, Mom. I'm making this up as I go and hoping it's enough. That's all any of us ever do, Anak. We do our best with what we have and hope the universe meets us halfway. They sat together in the quiet hospital room while afternoon light slanted through the windows and machines beeped their steady rhythms, and the world outside continued spinning toward whatever future Maya was building with her decisions. Eventually, Elena dozed off, and Maya slipped out into the hallway, pulling out her phone to check messages. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemail. Then a text from the same number. Ms. Linwood, we need to speak urgently. This is Grant Hale. Please call me back. Maya stared at the message, her instincts screaming warnings. Patricia had said not to engage with anyone from Crosstech, but Grant had warned her about the legal action before it happened. He'd called from a personal phone to give her information she'd needed. He'd claimed to disagree with how Crosstech had handled her father's situation. He was either genuinely conflicted and potentially useful, or he was Crosstech's most sophisticated trap, designed to gain her trust so he could manipulate her into mistakes. Maya compromised. She didn't call back, but she did send a text. I'm represented by counsel. All communication should go through Patricia Vance at Vance Legal. Her contact information is publicly available. The reply came back within seconds. This isn't about legal strategy. It's about information you need to stay safe. Please call me. 5 minutes. I'm risking everything to help you. Maya's thumb hovered over the call button. Patricia's voice echoed in her mind. Don't engage, don't communicate, don't risk creating evidence. But Grant's message carried urgency that felt genuine, and if he actually had information about threats to her safety, wasn't she obligated to at least hear him out? She found a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, checked that no one was within earshot, and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling, Grant said, his voice low and tense. I don't have much time. Damien is escalating faster than I expected, and I think you're in real danger. What kind of danger? The legal cease and desist was expected, standard corporate intimidation. But I just left a meeting where Damien was discussing alternative solutions with our head of corporate security. That's code for things that shouldn't be discussed in official channels. Maya's blood ran cold. Are you saying they're planning to hurt me? I'm saying they're discussing options beyond legal channels, and I don't know what that means, but it scared me enough to risk calling you. Grant paused, and she heard background noise, traffic maybe, or wind, suggesting he was calling from outside, somewhere he couldn't be overheard. Maya, I know you don't trust me. I haven't given you reason to, but I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'm trying to give you information that might keep you alive. Why? What's in it for you? Redemption, maybe, or just the chance to sleep at night knowing I didn't stand by while my company destroyed another person. His voice cracked slightly. I've watched Crosstech do terrible things for 4 years. I've participated in some of those things. I can't undo that, but maybe I can stop them from doing this one terrible thing. Maybe that's enough. Maya wanted to believe him. She also wanted to be smart enough not to trust someone who'd spent years enabling the very company he now claimed to be betraying. What exactly did Damien say in this meeting? She asked carefully. He said the journals needed to be neutralized before they became public. He said you needed to be discouraged from continuing your cooperation with media. He asked the security director about precedents for handling similar situations. Grant's breathing had quickened. I've heard Damien use that kind of language before, Maya. It never ends well for the people on the receiving end. Is this you warning me or Crosstech trying to scare me into silence? It's me betraying my employer because I'm finally accepting that I've been complicit in something monstrous. The rawness in his voice was hard to fake. Look, I don't expect you to trust me. I don't expect forgiveness or friendship or anything except that you'll take this warning seriously. Don't be alone. Don't go anywhere isolated. Tell your lawyer what I just told you. And Maya? If anything does happen to you, I'm prepared to testify about what I heard in that meeting. I'm prepared to give prosecutors everything I know about Crosstech's business practices. I'm burning my career either way. I'd just prefer you survive to see the fire. The line went dead before Maya could respond, leaving her alone in the hospital cafeteria with a warning she couldn't verify and a decision she couldn't avoid. She immediately called Patricia Vance and recounted the entire conversation. Patricia listened without interruption, then was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she said finally. Here's what we're going to do. I'm filing for an emergency protective order based on threats to your safety. Grant Hale's warning, combined with Crosstech's documented pattern of aggressive legal action, gives us grounds to request judicial protection. I'm also alerting the district attorney's office about potential criminal activity. If Crosstech is discussing alternative solutions to a whistleblower, that's conspiracy to commit assault or worse. Will any of that actually protect me? It creates a paper trail. It puts Crosstech on notice that authorities are watching. It makes it much riskier for them to actually follow through on whatever they're planning. Patricia's voice softened slightly. But Maya, you need to be realistic. Court orders are pieces of paper. They don't stop bullets or hired thugs or accidents that can't be traced back to corporate headquarters. If you're genuinely afraid for your safety, you need physical protection beyond what the legal system can provide. I don't have money for bodyguards. Sarah Chen might. Tech Integrity News has a fund for protecting sources in dangerous situations. I'll reach out to her, see what we can arrange. In the meantime, stay in public, stay visible, and consider going to the police if you notice any surveillance or threats. Don't try to be brave. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts and get somewhere safe. Maya spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze of escalating paranoia, seeing potential threats in every stranger who looked at her too long, every car that seemed to follow for more than 2 blocks, every shadow that moved in her peripheral vision. By the time evening fell, she'd convinced herself she was being followed, then convinced herself she was being paranoid, then convinced herself that paranoia was the only rational response when a multi-billion-dollar company was discussing alternative solutions to your existence. She returned to the hotel after dark, took 3 different routes to throw off potential surveillance, and locked herself in her room with a chair wedged under the door handle and her phone set to emergency dial if she needed it. Then she opened her laptop and found an email from Sarah Chen with the subject line, "First draft for your review." The attached article was titled, "The Hidden Cost of Innovation: How Crosstech Industries Covered Up Fatal Chip Failures." It was comprehensive, devastating, and entirely factual. Maya's testimony woven together with publicly available information about the Singapore data breaches, expert analysis from Professor Chen about the technical failures, and carefully worded implications about Crosstech's knowledge and culpability. Sarah had managed to tell the story without directly accusing Crosstech of murder, but the implication was clear enough that any reasonable reader would reach that conclusion themselves. It was brilliant journalism, protective of Maya while still exposing the truth, documented enough to survive legal challenges, explosive enough to generate the kind of public attention that might actually force accountability. At the end of the article, Sarah had included a note. "Publication scheduled for Monday morning, pending your approval and final fact check. Once this goes live, there's no taking it back. Make sure you're ready." Maya read the article 3 times, checking every fact, every quote, every implication. Then she replied with a single word: publish. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then closed her laptop and sat in the dark hotel room listening to her own heartbeat and wondering if she'd just signed her own death warrant or finally given her father's death the meaning it deserved. Tomorrow was Sunday. Monday, the article would publish. And then the world would know what Crosstech had done, what they'd covered up, and how far they'd been willing to go to protect their secrets. Maya just had to survive until then. She lay down on the hotel bed, fully clothed, her phone within reach, her mind too wired for sleep. Somewhere in the city, her mother was resting under a false name. Somewhere else, Grant Hale was either genuinely conflicted or brilliantly deceptive. Somewhere in Crosstech Tower, Damian Cross and his security director were discussing alternative solutions that Maya tried very hard not to imagine in detail. And somewhere in MIT's secure archives, 15 leather journals held the truth about a brilliant engineer who'd tried to do the right thing and been destroyed for it. Monday would tell whether his daughter would succeed where he'd failed, or whether Crosstech's power was absolute enough to suppress truth itself. Maya closed her eyes and tried to find rest that wouldn't come, counting down the hours until everything changed. Sunday passed with agonizing slowness, each hour stretching toward Monday morning like a held breath waiting to be released. Maya spent most of the day in her hotel room, venturing out only for meals in crowded restaurants where she could sit with her back to the wall and watch the door. Patricia had arranged for a security consultant, a former police detective named Marcus Rivera, to do periodic check-ins, and his presence was both reassuring and terrifying in what it confirmed about the level of threat she faced. "You're doing the right thing," Marcus told her during his evening visit, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes kind. "I've seen a lot of whistleblower cases. The ones who stay quiet always regret it. The ones who speak up at least get to live with themselves afterward." "Assuming they live at all," Maya said, trying for humor and landing somewhere closer to naked fear. "That's why I'm here. Nobody's getting to you on my watch." He handed her a business card with multiple contact numbers. "Call me if anything feels off. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning or you're just spooked by shadows. Better paranoid and alive than rational and dead." After he left, Maya tried to sleep and failed, her mind spinning through scenarios that ranged from vindication to disaster. At 2 a.m., she gave up, opened her laptop, and reread Sarah's article for the 20th time, searching for any flaw that Crosstech could exploit, any weakness that would undermine her father's legacy. She found none. The article was airtight, meticulously researched, devastating in its implications. When it published in 6 hours, the world would know what Crosstech had done. The question was whether knowing would be enough to force consequences. Monday morning arrived with pale sunlight that felt like a beginning or an ending. Maya couldn't tell which. She showered, dressed in the same jeans and sweater she'd been rotating through for 3 days, and checked her phone to find a text from Sarah sent at 5:47 a.m. Article goes live in 13 minutes. Whatever happens next, you were brave to step forward. Your father would be proud. Maya's hands were shaking as she opened her laptop and navigated to Tech Integrity News. At exactly 6 o'clock a.m., the homepage refreshed, and her father's story appeared at the top. Headline in bold, beneath it a photograph of Crosstech Tower that Sarah must have taken specifically for this piece, and below that the opening lines that Maya had memorized. When Dr. James Zhao tried to warn his employer about fatal design flaws in semiconductor chips bound for Singapore, he was fired. 6 months later, he was dead. Now his daughter is speaking out about what Crosstech Industries knew, when they knew it, and how many people died because profit mattered more than safety. Maya read the entire article again, watching the words appear on a public platform where anyone could see them, where Crosstech couldn't suppress them, where her father's warnings were finally being heard by people who might actually care. When she finished, tears were streaming down her face, grief and rage and relief tangled together into something she didn't have words for. Her phone started buzzing almost immediately. Texts from Patricia. Article is published. Expect immediate response from Crosstech Legal. Do not engage. From Marcus. Increase security protocols active. Stay in hotel until further notice. From Professor Chen. Your father's work is getting the recognition it deserved. Academic community is already responding. And then, unexpectedly, from Grant Hale. You did it. The story is out. Damien is losing his mind. Board emergency meeting called for 9 a.m. This might actually work. Maya stared at that last message, unsure what to make of Grant's continued involvement, his apparent pleasure at Crosstech's crisis. She was saved from having to respond by a call from Sarah. Have you seen the response? Sarah asked without preamble, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. The article has been shared 8,000 times in the last 40 minutes. 3 major news outlets have already reached out requesting interviews. The Singapore government is issuing statements about reopening investigations. Maya, this is going viral in exactly the way we needed. Crosstech will fight back, Maya said, trying to temper her own rising hope with realism. Of course they will. Their PR team is probably drafting denials right now. But here's the thing. We have documentation, we have expert verification from Professor Chen, we have your testimony on record, and we have your father's journals secured at MIT where Crosstech can't touch them. They can deny all they want, but the facts are public now. The story has a life of its own. As if to confirm Sarah's words, Maya's phone buzzed with an email notification from Crosstech's Public Relations Department. A mass statement denying all allegations, claiming Dr. Zhao's termination was unrelated to technical concerns, asserting that the Singapore chip failures were due to client misuse rather than design flaws, and threatening legal action against Tech Integrity News for publishing false and defamatory content. Maya forwarded it to Patricia without comment. The reply came back within minutes. Standard denial playbook. Ignore it. They're scared. By 8 o'clock a.m., Maya's phone was flooded with interview requests from journalists, news programs, and podcasts. Patricia called to discuss media strategy, advising selective engagement with outlets that could amplify the story while protecting Maya's legal position. You're going to want to tell your story everywhere, to everyone, Patricia said. That's natural, but be strategic. We do 1 major television interview, I'm thinking 60 minutes or similar, and a handful of print features with outlets that have strong legal departments. We avoid anything that puts you in real-time debate with Crosstech representatives. They have professional crisis managers. You have truth and trauma. That's not a fair fight on live television. I want to do the fight anyway, Maya said, surprising herself with the vehemence. I want Damien Cross to have to look at me on camera and deny what his company did to my father. I want people to see his face when he lies. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's emotionally satisfying but strategically risky. Let me think about how to structure it so you're protected. In the meantime, I need you to prepare for Crosstech's counteroffensive. They're not going to take this lying down. The counteroffensive arrived at 9:47 a.m. in the form of a press release from Crosstech's legal team, followed immediately by a lawsuit filing. Patricia forwarded both documents to Maya with a note. Expected but aggressive. They're suing you, me, Sarah Chen, Tech Integrity News, and MIT for defamation, theft of trade secrets, and tortious interference. They're demanding the journals, all our communications, and $10 million in damages. Don't panic. This is theater designed to intimidate. We'll respond appropriately. Maya read through the lawsuit, her initial fear giving way to a strange kind of clarity. Crosstech was playing exactly the hand everyone had predicted. Legal intimidation, character assassination, overwhelming force designed to make her fold. But she'd already given away the journals, already published the story, already stepped too far into the light to retreat back into shadows. She was all in now, for better or worse. At 11:30 a.m., her phone rang with an unknown number. She'd learned to be cautious about answering, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Linwood, this is Damien Cross." Maya's breath caught. She gestured frantically at her laptop, pulling up the recording app Marcus had installed, starting it with shaking hands before responding. "Mr. Cross, I'm recording this conversation." "As am I. I'm calling to make you an offer." His voice was smooth, controlled, giving nothing away. "I've read the article. I've reviewed our legal options. I've consulted with the board, and I'm prepared to acknowledge that mistakes were made in how we handled your father's concerns." Mistakes? The word tasted like poison. "You fired him for trying to save lives. You shipped defective chips that killed 43 people. You covered it up and destroyed the man who tried to stop you. Those aren't mistakes, Mr. Cross. Those are crimes." "That's your interpretation. Here's mine. Your father raised legitimate concerns that were addressed through proper technical review. The chips met all contractual specifications. The failures in Singapore were the result of thermal management issues at the client facilities, not design flaws. Your father's termination was part of a restructuring that affected multiple positions." Damien's tone remained infuriatingly calm. "But I understand you believe otherwise. I understand you're grieving, and I'm prepared to make this right." "How could you possibly make this right?" $2 million. Paid out over 5 years, structured as a research grant in your father's name. Crosstech establishes the Dr. James Zhao Memorial Fellowship for Semiconductor Safety Research. We issue a public statement acknowledging his contributions to the field. We ensure his legacy is honored appropriately. Damien paused for effect. "In exchange, you sign an NDA, withdraw your cooperation with the media, and work with us to issue a joint statement clarifying the facts around the Singapore situation." Maya's mind reeled. $2 million. A fellowship in her father's name, public acknowledgement of his work, everything she'd wanted, offered on a silver platter, contingent only on her silence about everything that actually mattered. "You want me to help you cover up his murder?" she said flatly. "I want to give you resources to honor his memory while also protecting Crosstech from unfair accusations that could destroy thousands of jobs and tank a company your father helped build." Damien's voice hardened slightly. "You're painting this as David versus Goliath, but you're not David, Ms. Linwood. You're a grieving daughter with incomplete information making accusations you can't prove. The journals you stole, that I inherited, that you removed from company property, contain partial documentation that doesn't tell the full story. Yes, your father raised concerns. Yes, we addressed them. Yes, chips failed in Singapore. But correlation isn't causation, and your crusade is based on connecting dots that don't connect. 43 people died. 43 people died because Singapore financial institutions failed to properly implement thermal management protocols, according to the independent investigation conducted at the time. Crosstech was exonerated. Those findings are public record. What you're doing is dredging up a closed case based on your emotional need to blame someone for your father's death." His voice softened artificially. "I understand that need. I sympathize with it, but I can't let you destroy this company to satisfy it." Maya felt something cold and clarifying settle over her. Damien was good, presenting himself as reasonable, offering generous terms, framing her as emotionally unstable and factually wrong. If she hadn't read her father's journals, hadn't seen the documented warnings, hadn't watched Crosstech's pattern of suppression and denial, she might have almost believed him. not interested in your money, she said quietly. I'm interested in truth. Truth is that I'm offering you $2 million and a memorial fellowship. Truth is that if you refuse, Crosstech's legal team will destroy you. We'll prove the journals were stolen property. We'll document your pattern of deception, starting with falsifying your employment application. We'll show you're an unreliable narrator with financial motivation to fabricate accusations. Damien's calm was cracking, anger bleeding through. You stepped into an arena you don't understand, Ms. Linwood. You declared war on a company with unlimited resources and no obligation to fight fair. Take the settlement. Honor your father's memory the way I'm offering. Or spend the next decade buried in litigation while we systematically dismantle your credibility. Are you threatening me, Mr. Cross? I'm stating facts, and I'm giving you 48 hours to consider the offer before it's withdrawn, and we proceed with full legal action. Talk to your lawyer, talk to your journalist friend, talk to whoever you need to talk to. But understand that this is the best deal you'll ever get, and refusing it is the stupidest decision you could possibly make. The line went dead. Maya sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, Damien's words echoing in the sudden silence. $2 million, a fellowship, public recognition, everything she'd wanted, wrapped in poison and presented as salvation. She immediately called Patricia and replayed the entire conversation from her recording. Patricia listened in silence, then let out a low whistle. That was both a settlement offer and a threat wrapped in corporate speak. The fact that he called you directly, that he's offering this much this fast, tells me he's more scared than he's letting on. Patricia's voice carried grim satisfaction. He knows the story is gaining traction. He knows his denials look weak compared to your documentation. He's trying to contain the damage before it spreads beyond control. Should I take it? That's not a legal question, it's a moral one. $2 million would change your life. A fellowship in your father's name would cement his legacy in the academic community. If your goal is financial security and public recognition of his work, this deal accomplishes that. But it requires you to lie about how he died and why. It requires you to help Crosstech continue covering up the Singapore deaths. It requires you to become complicit in the same system that destroyed your father. Patricia paused. Only you can decide what you can live with, Maya. I'll support whatever choice you make, but I need you to be clear-eyed about what you're choosing. Maya thought about her father's funeral, about the closed casket because his body had been too damaged in the accident for viewing. She thought about her mother's quiet grief, about the medical bills that had piled up, about 8 months of invisibility while she cleaned offices for people who'd killed her father and never noticed her watching them. She thought about 43 people dead in Singapore because Crosstech had prioritized quarterly earnings over human safety. I'm not taking the deal, she said. Tell Damien Cross he can take his $2 million and his memorial fellowship and shove them both. I want justice, not hush money. Patricia's voice carried something that might have been pride. I'll draft the response. And Maya? That was the right choice, even if it's going to make the fight harder. Courage is expensive, but cowardice costs more in the end. The next 48 hours became a blur of media appearances, legal filings, and escalating public attention. Sarah's article had gone viral, spawning follow-up coverage from major outlets that added their own investigations. The Singapore government announced it was reopening inquiries into the chip failures. 3 former Crosstech employees contacted Patricia's office offering to provide testimony about the company's pattern of prioritizing profits over safety. And through it all, Maya became the face of the story. The daughter fighting for her father's legacy, the whistleblower taking on corporate power, the cleaner who'd been invisible until she'd chosen to be seen. On Wednesday morning, she appeared on Good Morning America via satellite, answering questions about her father's work and Crosstech's response. The host asked if she was afraid of Crosstech's legal threats. I'm terrified, Maya said honestly, but I'm more terrified of staying silent while they continue to hurt people. My father died trying to do the right thing. I can't honor his memory by doing the wrong thing just because it's safer. The clip went viral within hours, shared millions of times, turning Maya from a name in an article into a symbol of something larger: resistance to corporate impunity, the power of individual courage, the possibility that truth might actually matter in a world that often seemed determined to suppress it. On Thursday afternoon, Grant Hale showed up at Maya's hotel unannounced. Marcus intercepted him in the lobby, called Maya for permission to let him up. She agreed, curious despite her caution. Grant looked terrible when he entered her room, exhausted, rumpled, carrying himself like a man who hadn't slept in days. I don't have long. I'm probably being followed, but I needed to tell you in person. I'm testifying. Maya blinked. Testifying? Against Crosstech. The DA's office opened a criminal investigation based on your father's journals and the Singapore death toll. They subpoenaed me this morning, and instead of fighting it, I'm cooperating. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture almost desperate. I'm giving them everything. Internal communications, meeting notes, documentation of every time Damien made decisions he knew were dangerous. I'm burning my entire career and probably facing criminal charges myself, but I'm doing it anyway. Why? Because I'm tired of being the villain in my own story. Because I watched you choose courage when it cost you everything, and I realized I'd spent 4 years choosing cowardice because it paid well. Grant's eyes were red-rimmed, his voice rough. I can't undo what I've done. I can't bring your father back, but I can make sure Damien Cross doesn't walk away from this. I can make sure the people who died in Singapore get justice. It's not enough, but it's all I've got. Maya studied him, trying to reconcile the polished executive she'd watched for 8 months with this broken man standing in her hotel room confessing his sins. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything that mattered. Now I'm just trying to figure out if I can find it again on the other side. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your father kept a jade pen on his desk. Did you know that? I saw it once when I visited his lab, before everything fell apart. He said it was a gift from his daughter, that it reminded him why his work mattered. Maya's breath caught. She'd given her father that pen for his 50th birthday, saved up for months to buy it, had it engraved with characters that meant integrity flows like water, persistent, essential, unstoppable. Damien took it after your father was fired, Grant continued quietly. Kept it on his own desk like a trophy. I saw it there last week and it made me sick, so I stole it back. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, handed it to Maya. It belongs to you now. Your father would have wanted you to have it. Maya opened the box with shaking hands and found the jade pen exactly as she remembered it. Smooth green stone, gold accents, her teenage handwriting engraved on the side. She'd thought it was gone forever, lost with everything else Crosstech had taken from her family. Thank you, she whispered. Grant nodded once and left without another word, and Maya sat on the hotel bed holding her father's pen, crying for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, letting years of grief and rage finally break through the dam she'd built to survive. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after she'd translated the proposal that had started everything, Maya received a call from Patricia with news that changed everything. The district attorney is filing criminal charges against Damien Cross and 3 other Crosstech executives, Patricia said, her voice vibrating with barely contained triumph. Negligent homicide, fraud, conspiracy to conceal evidence, and obstruction of justice. They're also charging the company itself with corporate manslaughter under a statute that's rarely used but applies when companies knowingly take actions that result in deaths. Maya couldn't breathe. They're actually doing it? They're actually doing it. Grant Hale's testimony was the tipping point. He provided documentation of meetings where executives discussed the Singapore risks and decided to ship anyway. Combined with your father's journals, the Singapore investigation findings, and testimony from other former employees, they have enough for a grand jury indictment. Patricia paused. Maya, you did this. You made this happen. Your father tried and failed, but you succeeded. They're going to face consequences. When? Arraignment is Monday. They'll be arrested over the weekend. It's going to be national news, probably international given the Singapore connection, and you're going to be at the center of it. Patricia's voice gentled. Are you ready for that? Maya thought about invisibility and visibility, about safety and courage, about her father's voice teaching her Mandarin at the kitchen table, and her mother's hand squeezing hers in a hospital bed. She thought about 43 people dead in Singapore and 15 journals secured at MIT and a jade pen that had somehow found its way home. I'm ready, she said. The arrest happened Saturday evening. Maya watched the news coverage from her hotel room, footage of Damien Cross being led from his Upper East Side penthouse in handcuffs, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief that someone had actually held him accountable. The media had a field day, the story dominating every news cycle, pundits debating corporate responsibility and whistleblower protection and whether justice was possible in a system designed to protect the powerful. Sunday brought more developments. Crosstech's board of directors issued a statement suspending Damien and launching an internal investigation. The company's stock dropped 23%. Three major clients announced they were suspending contracts pending review of safety protocols. Singapore's government filed civil suits seeking damages for the data breach deaths. The edifice Crosstech had built on suppressed truth and corporate impunity was crumbling, and Maya had lit the match that started the fire. On Monday morning, she visited her mother at the care facility, finding Elena awake and alert, watching news coverage of Damien's arraignment on the television. "They're saying you brought down one of the most powerful tech companies in America," Elena said as Maya entered. "They're calling you a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to stay quiet." Maya sat beside her mother's bed, took her hand. "Dad was the hero. He tried to stop them when it mattered. I just finished what he started. He would be so proud of you, Anak. I wish he could see what you've accomplished." "Maybe he can." Maya squeezed her mother's hand gently. "The DA's office wants me to testify at the trial. It could take months, maybe longer. It's going to be hard and public, and they'll try to destroy my credibility in every way possible." "But you're going to do it anyway." "I'm going to do it anyway." Maya smiled, surprised to find it felt genuine. "Because someone has to. Because silence is what they're counting on. Because if I don't, then 43 people died for nothing, and Dad's warnings meant nothing, and nothing ever changes." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "When did you become so strong?" "I learned from watching you survive impossible things." Maya leaned forward, kissed her mother's forehead. "And from Dad, who taught me that integrity matters more than safety. And from 8 months of being invisible, which taught me that sometimes the only way to be seen is to demand visibility even when it costs everything." They sat together in the quiet hospital room while the television continued its coverage of the arraignment, the commentators discussing legal strategy and corporate accountability, and whether this case might finally represent a shift in how America dealt with companies that prioritize profit over human life. 3 weeks later, Maya sat in Patricia's office reviewing settlement offers from Crosstech's insurers. Not hush money this time, but actual damages, compensation for wrongful death and emotional distress and defamation, and all the ways the company had tried to destroy her for telling the truth. The numbers were substantial, enough to secure her mother's care indefinitely and provide Maya with freedom to choose what came next. "You don't have to accept any of these," Patricia said. "You could push for trial, potentially get more, make them face public judgment in court." Maya considered this. Part of her wanted that. Wanted to watch Damien Cross squirm on a witness stand, wanted a jury to hear every detail of what Crosstech had done, wanted the public catharsis of complete exposure. But another part of her was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of fear, tired of being defined by trauma and rage, and the need for vindication. "I'll take the settlement," she said finally, "but only if Crosstech agrees to establish a real safety review board with independent oversight, agrees to publish my father's research with full credit, and agrees to fund whistleblower protections for employees who report safety concerns." Patricia smiled. "Now you're thinking like someone who wants to change systems rather than just punish individuals." "I'll make it happen." 2 months after the article published, Maya stood in MIT's semiconductor engineering department at a ceremony honoring her father's work. Professor Chen had organized the event, coordinating with the university to establish the Dr. James Zhao Chair in Quantum Encryption Safety, a permanent faculty position funded by the settlement and dedicated to research that prioritized human safety over corporate profit. Maya gave a short speech, her father's jade pen in her pocket for courage, speaking to an auditorium full of students and faculty and journalists about a man who'd tried to do the right thing and paid the ultimate price. "My father believed that innovation without ethics was destruction with a patent," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "He believed that the people who build technology have a responsibility to the people who use it. He believed that speaking truth to power was worth the cost, even when the cost was everything." She paused, looking out at faces that were actually listening, actually caring about words that had been silenced for too long. He was right. And I hope that by standing here today, by refusing to let his death be meaningless, I've helped prove that truth can still matter more than power, if enough people are willing to fight for it. The applause was thunderous, but Maya barely heard it. She was thinking about her father, hoping somehow he knew his work was finally being recognized, his warnings finally being heard, his legacy finally extending beyond a closed casket and a falsified accident report. After the ceremony, Grant Hale approached her hesitantly. He'd resigned from Crosstech, was cooperating fully with prosecutors, and according to news reports was facing possible charges himself for his role in the cover-up. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me the chance to do the right thing, even if it was 4 years too late." Maya studied him. This man who'd enabled terrible things, who'd warned her when it mattered, who'd ultimately chosen truth over self-preservation. He wasn't redeemed, probably never would be, but he was trying. That had to count for something. "You're testifying against Damien?" she asked. "Next month. I'll tell them everything, every meeting, every decision, every time we chose profit over safety. It won't undo the damage, but maybe it'll prevent the next company from making the same choices." "That's all any of us can do," Maya said. "Try to make the next thing better, even if we can't fix the past." Grant nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "Your father was right, you know, about everything. I wish I'd listened to him when it mattered. I wish I'd been brave enough to stand with him instead of against him." "Me too," Maya said softly. "But we don't get to rewrite the past. We just get to decide what we do with the present." 6 months after everything began, Maya stood in her new office at a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting whistleblowers in the tech industry. It wasn't large, just a desk, a computer, a window overlooking a park, but it was hers, earned through courage rather than deception, occupied through choice rather than desperate necessity. Her mother was in remission, living in a comfortable assisted living facility paid for by the settlement. The eviction notice that had started this whole cascade of events was a distant memory, relevant only as the catalyst that had pushed Maya to step out of shadows and into the light. Damien Cross was awaiting trial on multiple felony charges. Crosstech was operating under a consent decree that mandated independent safety oversight. The Singapore government had received compensation for the data breach victims, and 3 more former employees had come forward with stories of corporate malfeasance that were spurring additional investigations. The system was changing, slowly and imperfectly, but changing nonetheless. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. "New lead on semiconductor company cutting corners. Want to collaborate on the investigation?" Maya smiled, typed back, "Always." Because this was her work now, not cleaning up after powerful men while they made decisions that hurt people, but cleaning up the systems that allowed powerful men to operate without accountability. It wasn't revenge, and it wasn't quite justice, but it was purpose, and purpose was enough. She pulled out her father's jade pen, held it up to the light, reading the engraved characters she'd chosen so many years ago. Integrity flows like water, persistent, essential, unstoppable. Her father had lived that truth. He died for it. And Maya had finally learned to embody it, not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through the simple, difficult choice to keep speaking truth, even when silence would have been safer. The pen caught the afternoon light, jade glowing green and gold, and Maya set it on her desk where she could see it every day. A reminder of where she'd come from, what she'd survived, and who she'd become in the process of refusing to stay invisible. Outside her window, the city continued its endless motion, full of people making choices that would ripple outward in ways they couldn't predict. Some of those choices would be cowardly, prioritizing safety over integrity, silence over truth. But some would be brave, would be difficult, would be exactly the kind of choices that changed systems and saved lives and honored the memories of people who'd tried and failed, but whose failures had planted seeds that others could nurture into something better. Maya picked up her phone and called her mother. "Anak, how was the meeting?" "Good. I'm working on a new case. Another company, another cover-up, another chance to make sure someone doesn't get away with putting profits over people." "You sound happy." Maya considered this, surprised to realize it was true. Not happy in the simple sense, not unburdened by grief or trauma or the weight of everything she'd survived, but happy in the deeper sense, purposeful, aligned with her values, living a life her father would have recognized and approved. "I am happy," she said, "or at least I'm becoming happy. It's a process." "Everything worthwhile is," Elena said, her voice warm with maternal pride. "Your father used to say that integrity isn't a destination, it's a direction. Keep walking that direction, Maya Bug. Keep walking, and eventually you'll find yourself somewhere worth being." They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, dinner plans, television shows, the weather, and then said goodbye with promises to visit soon. Maya set down her phone, turned to her computer, and opened the file Sarah had sent about the new investigation. There was work to do. There would always be work to do, because corruption was eternal, and power always sought to protect itself, and the fight for accountability was never really finished. But Maya had learned something in the months since she'd placed that USB drive on Grant Hale's desk and stepped out of invisibility. Individual courage mattered. One person standing up and refusing to be silent could start cascades that toppled giants. Truth was powerful, especially when powerful people tried to suppress it. Her father had known this. He'd died knowing it. And now Maya knew it too, bone deep, learned through survival and struggle and the slow, difficult process of transforming from victim to witness to advocate. She began reading Sarah's research, her father's pen resting on the desk beside her computer, a talisman and a reminder and a promise that some things, integrity, truth, the refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice, were worth fighting for, even when the cost was everything, especially when the cost was everything, because that was when it mattered most.